Can Jeff Lanier hear me? Can Micah Gravely hear me? Can anybody hear me right now? Are we not live yet?
I can hear you.
Chairman Reeves, I love the sound of your voice.
Not nearly as pretty as the sound of your voice, Gravely. So, all right, here we go. We are live. Amen. Hallelujah. I wasn't sure we were going to get here. Okay, this is the Reeves Subcommittee of Judiciary Non-Civil, and we have one bill, a very complex and important bill on the calendar today. It's House Bill 327. We are working on a sub, and that is LC 280243S. Is that correct, Mr. Momtahan? LC 280243S. Looks like boy, gift that keeps on giving. All right, we are working on LC 280249S. Does everybody have that bill in front of them? Okay. All right, so I'm just going to kind of get this thing teed off. This bill has the underlying bill is a bill that this committee heard last year and passed, and the issue passed the House of Representatives, but was not continued once we came back from the COVID break, like many other matters that we're taking up this session. And in the interim, the bill is largely the same bill brought to us last year with the addition of Section 3. And Section 3 brings a very new concept to this committee and to Georgia. And the effort here is to attempt to be able to regulate and create a better pathway for persons who are the victims of, receiving fraudulent, artificial, or counterfeit or stolen goods through the internet commerce. And this is a substantial problem. Probably most of us in this room have been victim of this if we do enough e-commerce. And like a lot of things that we do in this committee and in the House and even in the Senate, it is we debate the ideas, but we really have to look at the words on the paper and figure out, are we solving this the right way? And I think there is this is a big issue. It stands to potentially impact a lot of online marketplaces, and so we do well by being very prudent and methodical with what we do with something like this, and really attempting to get it right. We are at that point in the legislative session where everything is bonkers right now and everybody is stretched very thin, but I have tried my hardest to get as much of this committee together today so that we can hear this. And I want to ask hard questions, and I want good answers, and I want us to really, really, really dive in and get to the heart of these issues. And I know we have two members online as well, so we have a good number of this committee here today. But my goal is for us to come away from this with a different sense of understanding that we have now from both sides. And so I want everybody in the audience that's going to testify, or that's online that's going to testify, I want you to all pretend like you're the lawyer and we're the judge, and you're making your case to us. And so with that being said, since Mr. Momtahan is the author of the bill, I will pass it to him, and then we will the proponents of the bill can go first. It'll just be a similar format to what we did last week. And what I also want you to walk us through the sub. Tell us what changes were made. Tell us why those changes were made. Talk about the issues that were raised. Talk about whether or not they've been addressed, etc. And then we will grill you with questions. So, Mr. Momtahan, what number are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, today I have the committee substitute to House Bill 327. Take this mask off, that's okay. It's going to kind of address some of the changes that I think the concerns that the committee had in the last meeting. At our last hearing, we had heard from the members of the committee. So with those questions, there are some changes. And so let's go to part 2. That'll be page 2. This further defines the actors in the chain of transaction, the sale of gift cards in the secondary market. We made the language more specific as to who is and who is not required to record the information. And so you'll see some changes there. See, number 2, under part 2, it allows for the electronic recording of the pertinent information should the third-party card dealer so desire, to allow for more modern methods of recording. So we understand that those are issues.
You got to tell us what lines you're on.
Okay. See, for number 1 under part 2, this is the actors in the chain of transaction. So these are, for example, on line 42, third-party card dealer. Okay. So it basically describes the operability of the language that was already in part 2 of this bill. So, for example, we've added third-party card dealer. Then you've got third-party card dealer shall maintain a permanent record on line 48, which shall be entered. And then you've got the name, the age, address of the seller, or the entry shall go. Again, under 65, a third-party card dealer, any clerk, agent, employee. And then under number 2, which is the electronic recording, again, we go back to the database language here, which is under line 59. That was number 2. Move to part 3. This is where the
hang on,
Mr. Chairman, sorry to interrupt, Representative Monahan. Are we gonna do kind of conversational thing to dig in, or because we're ripping through this thing?
Let me do that if we can. Let me present these changes, and then y'all feel free to, because there is a lot here, and I know this is a complex bill. So if I may, Mr. Chairman, just kind of go to the change, and then we'll tear back into it.
Okay.
But just so that everybody's clear, that what you're going through right now does not relate to section 3 of the bill.
It does not. This is clarity for other folks.
Okay. So kind of let's quickly walk through section 2. I don't know that we're here to, at this point, to discuss in a lot of detail section 2. I think what we want to do is get to section 3, but feel free to quickly walk us through.
Okay. So section 2, the actual bill, let me go back to my original talking points from last year here. So part 2 is the recording of card transactions by unauthorized merchants on the secondary market. So what we're trying to capture here is the folks that are maybe stealing goods or using somebody to steal a good and then returning that item back to a merchant, right, for a card, right? So you steal the item, you return it, you say, hey, I don't have a driver's license, or you have somebody else who returns it, whatever. They give you a stored value card. You take that said stored value card and you take it to a pawn shop, right? Under this, it would be under the changes, right? A pawn shop would not be a corporate authorized reseller, right? They would not be a corporate issuer. They would be under part 2 as a third-party card dealer. Okay, that is the new kind of descriptive language that we're using. Okay, under this section. The reason we're doing that is because they're really not authorized by the company to sell that. So, for example, if I go to Walgreens or CVS, and I hope it's okay for me to use those names here, but if I go to one of these stores that it is a authorized reseller of these cards, that means I can take the card, it has no value on the shelf. Okay, I take it to the cash register, and the lady or gentleman who's at the cash register says, "Okay, how much would you like to put on this card?" So at that point, I could put on $10, $15. If I'm, birthday present, I could put on $100. Whatever the value is of the card, I can put on the card. They are a corporate authorized reseller. Is that kind of clear on that terminology, or the expectation of what you'd expect a corporate authorized reseller to be? right? Okay. And so we are defining that under part two, who these folks are. So going back to part two here. So we are now tracking that information, and it's important. Let me give you an example. So this person has stolen the good. They have returned the good for a stored value card. They've received this. They've taken it to a pawn shop, and they may get a percentage of the value, whether that's 70% or 80% or whatever it may be. They can actually turn this into a business. And so in some ways, it gets much, much more complicated. So for example, I'll take you through another example. If you give me the time to do that, Mr. Chairman, I steal a good from a store like Home Depot. I return the good without an ID. I don't have any type of identification. I don't have the card that was used to purchase the good. So they issue a card, a stored value card. I take said stored value card, but before I take it to the pawn shop, or as we say, corporate authorized reseller, or I'm sorry, no. Before I take it to the third party card dealer, okay, I scratch off the silver ink on the back of such card. And at that point, I would write down the numbers. Okay, I take that number. That is like a card number, like you'll see on the front of your credit card. Okay, so I take that card number. Then I go on somewhere like eBay or another place, and I can actually buy the actual silver stuff that goes on that card. So the silver sticker that goes on the back, that I can buy another one. I put that back over the card. I take it to a pawn shop or a third-party card dealer. I get my value, but I still have that card information. So now I've returned a stolen good for value on a stored value card. I still have the value because I have the number. I give it to a pawn shop and get a percentage of that in cash money, right? Then I go buy the same tool. That's how egregious this can become, right? That is how severe this issue can become. And it's just an end of the cycle, right? Okay. So with Section 2, what we're trying to address is this idea that you can go and get a stored value card, return, and turn it over to a pawn shop without tracking any of that information. So that just requires that we're getting certain pertinent information from the seller of that card.
Here's what I'm going to do. I've tried very hard to gather as much of a group of us as we can today. And this is probably about as good as we're going to get with numbers. Right. And the emphasis on this is trying to talk through Section 3. We've obviously, whatever changes have come from Section 2, we'll talk about that when the time comes. But I really want to focus on getting to Section 3 and talking about the changes in Section 3 right now.
Without a doubt.
Sure.
I was understanding that you wanted me to talk about Section 2.
No, Section 3 was what we.
I'm sorry. I think I was running through the changes. I'm sorry.
No. That's okay. I think it's just a breakdown of communication. Let's focus on Section 3. We've got a lot of folks here and a lot of committee members here and online. Right. And Section 3 is where we've got
I'll scratch everything. I'm happy to do that.
Sure, let's do that.
Without a doubt. Yeah. And in fact, that's what I was a little surprised you wanted to rehash Section 2. I was like, well, we can do that certainly if you want to, but I'm more than happy to talk about Section 3, which I feel is
as my wife would say, we're not jiving right now. So
listen, no, it's probably because neither one of us eat. I don't work good without eating.
The momster
don't work good without eating.
All right, let's move on to Section 3.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Section 3.
Chairman, thank you very much. Appreciate you. We'll end you here. Okay, so number 3 is a section that we're trying to capture folks that are actually reselling these goods on the internet, right? So let me give you a great example. I have gone into a Home Depot. I think for me, right, it's easy if I give you the operability, Mr. Chairman, of how this actually works. How does this affect Georgians? How does this affect people? How does this affect stores and merchants and everybody else? What does this environment look like? So let me paint you a picture. Okay. A person steals an item, okay, or several items from a store, okay, whether it be a brick and mortar local merchant, whether that be your local Walmart, your local Home Depot, your local Best Buy, whatever, it doesn't matter. They do it. They do this in several different ways. One of the biggest ways they actually do it is through a large item. So, for example, if I have a bathtub, okay, it comes in a very large box. I take said box and I fill that box up with a lot of screwdrivers or a lot of different types of different goods, maybe drills or drivers or reciprocating saws, or it could be TVs and monitors. It could be HDMI cables, or you name it, they can fit it into the tub box or TV box or whatever it may be. So just so we're clear on that, they take it. They may even purchase said tub or large TV, knowing that the contents therein are worth 10, 20, 30 times the cost of what that item was. They take that, and then they have to have a place where they can resell it, right? So it's the marketplace that is actually facilitating them to resell that good. So part 3, I'm gonna go back to my original note so that we can bust this thing wide open. So part 3 basically addresses the fact that these folks that are stealing the goods are using online marketplaces to then sell those goods, right? We know what happens. We see it. One of the most easiest ways to find it, right, is that some stores sell certain goods. So, for example, I was on eBay earlier today just checking. And so I brought up this here, and this is a Ryobi 1 Plus 18-volt lithium-ion battery. Okay, just for the record, there's a camera over there. That's a battery. That brand is only sold at the Home Depot. Okay, there's 2 ways something like that could be sold. 3 ways it could be sold, right? Let me try to enumerate them. Number 1, let's say you don't like Ryobi, right? Ryobi. I'm a Milwaukee man. Okay, so I've got the whole Milwaukee line up at the house in my garage. I've got all my Milwaukee tools, the red, the pretty, great, wonderful. But my daddy come over for Christmas and he gives me a Ryobi battery. Well, I got no use for the Ryobi battery. So given, I need a place I can get rid of this thing. Maybe I don't want to return it. Maybe I don't have the receipt, whatever. That online marketplace becomes the easiest place for me to return it. That is absolutely one way that could be. But the problem is that when we get on the internet and we start looking through these things, we start seeing somebody who has 100 plus of these batteries. And we say, okay, so I don't think somebody got I don't think a daddy got somebody, 100 Ryobi batteries, right? But we see that they have that inventory on the internet. So it starts leading you to say, okay, where do they get this battery from? In these cases, they may be stolen, right? Number 3 would be their liquidation, right? It could be something like.
What was number 2? Number 1 was you sell the battery that you can't use online. What's number 2?
Well, no, that maybe your daddy gave to you, right? It was a present, so I'm reselling it. Number 2 would be that they're stolen, right? They could possibly be stolen from a store in bulk, right? Or several stores.
And then number 3 is a liquidation.
And number 3 could be a liquidation, maybe an insurance claim or something like that. So, but these folks are taking these online and they're selling them. And they're selling them as new and unused. And that's the problem, because these are house brands of goods. So if you look at things like Husky, or you look at things like Mainstays, or you look at something like, Ryobi or something like that, it is a store branded good. So it is almost impossible, right? Or nearly impossible for you to have hundreds, if not thousands of these items listed online in that inventory.
How do you know if you go online and attempt to, and you you find that battery online, how would you know that that seller has hundreds or thousands of them as opposed to?
So I'll show you here. This is the marketplace facilitator example number 1. That's on y'all's desk. So
And if anybody else out there has it, it's okay.
See if I can get it. Camera can get that there, but anyway. So look at the number 1. You see, and just kind of follow me here.
What website is this from?
This seems to be eBay. The top one seems to be eBay.
Okay.
All right, and so follow me here where it says, you see it says 12 volt, go under, you see the 5 stars, you see condition says new, underneath that says buy one, $67.99.
So it says more than 10 available and
There you go.
113 sold.
113 sold. You got it. Now Husky is a house brand. So it really brings up the question, how did they get 113 of these items? Are they
Is the prices that we're seeing here below what would be the value if you purchased it in the store?
Could be. I don't know on the specific tool, but certainly, it could be a little bit of a deal, right? Something that's a little bit enticing, right? Oh, man, I can get this thing for $10 or $15 less. And it's, Mr. Chairman, did you want to pass?
I was just going to hit in on what the chairman is hitting on. So how do we know that that some Home Depot in Arizona is not running a special for $50 on this thing and they're making a $19 profit and they bought 113 of them? That's the question.
I think that's a great question. Okay. And so to the gentleman's point, I think what we're asking to do is to provide certain information so that we can track and know who's selling these items, where they're from, what their phone number is, because right now we've got no way of knowing. So I think you're exactly right in a very genuine question to say, hey, what's going on here? And Mr. Chairman, I would just simply respond to you is that's exactly the point of this bill. Okay. And so with that, I appreciate y'all's favorable consideration.
What is okay. And I understand everything that you just said. And I think that there's not a person in the room or on the issue that doesn't acknowledge that there is a serious problem here to address. And so I think with that, we now dive into the details. And what I want is for somebody who's here to testify on behalf of the bill to talk through again. I don't know that after the last hearing, we walked away from here with a clear sense of what this bill actually requires, who to do what. And I want a very thorough walkthrough of that, the changes that were made from where we were a week ago to where we are now. And then let's go from there.
So for that, the Georgia Retail Association has been a great help to me in putting these code sections together. I wanted to give you the great 30,000 foot delta view of this idea, and the rest of it I'm going to let is it Mr. Thomas Busey? Come on up, Thomas, and give a detailed look at what I'm capturing in this bill.
And and I do not take offense if I lead you or cut you off here, because I'm looking for very specific testimony. And if we start to go a different direction, I'm going to bring it back from what I think we need to hear. So have at it, Mr. Busey.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Representative Monahan, for presenting the bill and for all the work that you've done to help retailers in the state of Georgia, especially on this very important issue. I'd like to talk to the bill and the changes that have been made in the bill. So starting at line 89 on the sub that you have, the definition of consumer product. I think it's important that we begin there. At the previous committee meeting, there was a lot of questions from members of the committee around what I would call the Etsy question. And the Etsy question would be, well, what if you're making tchotchkes in your garage and you're selling them? Should this encompass you? I don't know that it should. And to that end, in listening, and I think you'll find that about our changes are all a result of listening to the questions the committee had. We included at line 91 an exception of items that are manufactured by an individual as long as those items are not reproductions, facsimiles, or imitations of anything else that's trademarked or protected in commerce.
So let me stop you right there. So if I have the sophistication and the tools at home to, since we're talking about Ryobi, if I can produce a skill saw that looks just like a Ryobi saw and it rips off the trademark and it has the Ryobi stickers and everything on it, that's technically manufactured by me illegally, but nonetheless, that would not be, that would be required. If a person was doing that kind of thing, then they would not be excluded from the definition of consumer product.
Correct.
Okay.
Let me go in a little bit too. So I like the exception that I think I like the intent there, but I just did a search on this Husky thing for Amazon, and this comes up and it brings up another point. So Amazon is already listing the seller's information and address and everything. So this looks like a genuine Husky here, but the seller is Guangzhou, Taiming, Jiangxi, Shui. So, and all their stuff's they're in China. So in saying that, I'm thinking, is there any way that some of this stuff is being the actual manufacturer who is manufacturing Husky for Home Depot or whoever they're doing it for? Is there any way that those actual manufacturers are skipping the retailer?
I don't know the correct answer to that other than to say that it's not outside the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
I think that, look, I mean, at this point, I think it's an undisputed international fact that frankly this isn't a bipartisan issue in international politics. That there has been consistent bipartisan discussion and support of the idea that there are a lot of knockoff items that come from production in China that are shipped to the United States that are counterfeit. And I think we can say that without crossing into some threshold of international political debate. But I think that is if we can't acknowledge that, then we might as well, stop this right now. And so
Good point.
With that,
Good point.
I mean, but so with that, how is that addressed by this? Because now we're talking about international commerce, and frankly, this thing makes my head hurt as it is, and now it hurts even more.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for the pain in your cranium, and I'll take some ownership of that. But I think that how that is addressed here is that you have to go look at the further definitions in the bill. So this is the product, and the product is what's being sold. You have to go further down. A seller is anybody who's selling. For this to trigger, for this to address that individual, they would have to meet the threshold of a high volume third-party seller. A high volume third-party seller is 200 or more transactions in a total aggregate value of $5,000 or more of new and unused product. So that answers that. But to that end, to kind of skip further through the bill, the information that is required to say that these people are who that they say they are. That's the ultimate goal of this bill, is so in online marketplaces, folks are who they say that they are. The long name that the committee chairman pronounced, which I will not attempt, we don't know if that guy's real name is John Smith, or if he is located in Mesa, Arizona. Well, and he just puts that as a diversion. What this bill does, to your point, sir, is the information is provided and it's verified. And I think that is real. I mean, that's the crux that makes sure. And so to combat that and
the information is provided to who, and it's verified by who?
Correct. The information is provided by the seller when they become a high volume third-party seller to the online marketplace.
Online marketplace, eBay,
correct,
etc.
Yes, sir, and that is defined.
Is Walmart.com an online marketplace?
Walmart has a marketplace.
HomeDepot.com, is that an online marketplace?
It is not an online marketplace because they are not selling for the purposes of this. Mm-hmm. To be an online marketplace, you have to facilitate the sales of third-party sellers.
How about PayPal PayPal and Venmo, both of those.
They are not an online marketplace, sir. No, by this definition, because they are not facilitating this. They are providing a service. They are not facilitating a sale of third-party goods.
They facilitate payment. That's in the definition.
That is one of the things that would facilitate payment.
So I'm reading these as
Mhm.
ors. Are these, let's see, seller to engage in the sale, purchase, storage, shipping, or delivery. So it's not and. So if they facilitate payment for a third party sale, it seems as though payment would be PayPal, Venmo. When you PayPal does it for
Yes, sir.
eBay.
And to answer your question, I would look further at line 102 and hosts one or more third-party sellers. So that is a key component to it. They can be doing all of that. They can be doing some of that, one or two of that. If they are not hosting the third-party sellers on their website, then they are not technically an online marketplace.
Okay, thank you.
So you said, let's go back to where I said the information is provided to who, and then you said the online marketplace.
Correct.
So that means, again, tell me exactly what information are we talking about?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. This information, which is further defined in the bill beginning on line 117. Well, I mean, the intro to it is line 113. So to again, go through the chain, the third party seller, once it reaches that definition of a high volume third party seller, turns that information over to the online marketplace. And you'll hear from some online marketplaces that, or at least one today, where this is information that in a lot of cases is already possessed. This is information that to do a legitimate business, in my opinion, you should already have.
All right,
Now,
I'm
then it's up
confused
to answer
again.
your
So
question.
help me clear up here.
yes, sir.
What information needs to be provided? Once they clear the threshold,
Correct.
what information do they provide the online marketplace?
Deposit account information for a financial institution, which is a really fancy way of saying your bank account or whatever financial institution account you're using to conduct your business.
So so for me, it would be Synovus and then my bank account number. I mean,
Correct. Which I would imagine almost every instance is something that is already in possession by an online marketplace. Otherwise, a third party seller would not get paid by these people.
what if it's a, I'm going to say this wrong because I don't know what I'm talking about, but what if it's a third party pay vendor like a PayPal or you could see how confused we are right now.
I understand. I understand the confusion. And I think that's why that verification, sir, goes back to the folks who can verify that. It can be verified by the online marketplace. It may be verified by, and I'm just trying to find it in the sub, in line 118. Again, they already have the information. And it comes down to who is verifying it. It may be verified by the marketplace. It may be verified by the payment processor that is contracted by the individual or by the marketplace, or it may be verified by any other third-party verification service that should now or in the future exist to verify that account information.
So y'all's position is that this information, again, and I'm going to jump ahead to what I anticipate might be some of the testimony from the folks that have concerns about this. Your perspective is that in the vast majority of situations, perhaps there's an outlier that is not accounted for, but in the vast majority of situations, the bank account information is in the possession of the seller because that is the information that they have to use in order to be compensated.
I would correct. The bank account information is always in possession of the seller, sir, because it is the seller's bank account information. But I think what you meant to say was that the bank account information is already in possession of the online marketplace. It would be my assertion.
See,
that, yes.
I'm confused again.
Okay.
This would put the bank account information Okay, so what you're saying, we're kind of past the idea that the seller would have this information already because the seller
Correct.
has to have it in order to get paid.
Correct.
So what you're saying is that this puts that information in the possession or requires it to be put in the possession of the online marketplace, the eBay, the whatever it may be, and then they have to retain that information in some form or fashion, correct?
No, sir. In most cases, they are already in retention of that information and in possession of that information. What the bill contemplates is that that online marketplace or payment processor or whomever's chosen beginning on line 118 verifies that information.
Okay, so the requirement, so your position is they already have this information,
Yes, sir.
but what the bill requires them to do, and if anybody disagrees with that, then please take notes right now and want to get to the bottom of this. So if anybody disagrees with any of this, and take notes and let's debate it. But what the bill requires is that the online marketplace take this information that you say they already have, and then they verify it. Talk to us. What does verify mean?
Verify is defined in the bill, sir.
Okay, so talk us through
Correct.
but we can read it, or talk us through comments. Tell us
Mhm.
how this works. How do you verify?
Beginning in line 108, for those following along at home, confirm the information provided, obviously, by the use of third party or proprietary Am I cutting out?
I think you're fine.
Okay. Third party or proprietary identify verifications. Basically, you come up with a way to you do it. You verify. You can come up with a way on your own, or you can contract, so long as it is a two-factor identification. And further in the bill, a public record search, a government issued document. If a seller presents with a government issued document to the online marketplace, that will serve as, hey, this is authentic. It is real. You're not having to contact the government. I don't, again, it goes back to something that I'd heard before about this being onerous. There is flexibility in how it would be verified. It just needs to be verified.
Okay, so what you're saying is that verifying this information would require that the online marketplace participate in at least a two-factor authentication process. And so what I want the folks that are on the other side of this position, again, we're taking notes. If this is unduly burdensome or unreasonable, this specific issue, then I want to hear from y'all on that, because what you're saying is they got to take this bank account information and they have to do a two-factor authentication of the bank information.
Correct.
How do they do that? I know it says third party or proprietary identity.
They have the flexibility to determine how they would accomplish that and meet that burden in statute. We're not outlining that. We're giving them the flexibility.
Are there, I'm in kindergarten on all this stuff. Are
Yes.
there companies out there that do this, that say eBay can go and hire company XYZ, and company XYZ takes their bank account information of their customers or buyers and does the two-factor authentication? Is that how that works?
I'm certain that there are, but just so I don't misspeak, I would let someone else speak to that question.
Okay, and then understand that I want to know exactly what it is because if part of the argument of this is that it's creating undue burden on our online businesses, then I don't think that we can assess the degree of that burden if we don't know how easily accessible or readily available it is to find somebody that can help you do the two-factor authentication, or how expensive it is. Does the cost of doing such interfere with your bottom line, that it makes, that it's a significant expense that diminishes the entire purpose of your business? Those are the kind of things that I want to know, because I've been getting emails from people, this is overly burdensome. So I need to know those kind of things. What exactly does that mean? And how would somebody go about complying with this? And how easy or how hard is it?
Right. I understand that, sir. But I would say that, well, I can't answer the specifics of the companies out there that do this. I would say that we are not talking about Steve Jobs in his garage with a server. We're talking about the most complex technology companies in the world having the capacity to do this kind of stuff.
Okay, and I understand that, but if we require somebody that is in a legitimate business of selling new or unused, goods online, and they're not a very sophisticated business, I'm a lot more concerned with how it affects the small guy than the big guy.
The answer there, sir, is that it doesn't, because in that scenario, the small guy is providing the information. They are not having to verify anything. It is their information. The verification is incumbent completely on the online marketplace so that they know with whom.
Well,
they're
what
doing
about the
business.
smaller online marketplaces then? And I don't, again, I'm talking about things I don't know right now.
Absolutely. And I would say an example was given in the previous committee from our friend at the Toy Association on the Lego marketplace.
Mhm.
That's a very small marketplace and it's a very niche marketplace. But in order to do business on that marketplace and sell Legos as a third-party vendor, all of this is required. They do this now. And I think you'll hear from another much larger marketplace that does that. Now, I would say, though, that most of this information, sir, if you keep looking at what is required to be verified, is not that onerous for anyone to verify, no matter what size you are. If you're looking at the contact information that which is verifying an email address, it's something that these marketplaces do every day. Verifying a phone number, which is all VoIP.
Okay, so let me interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
How do they verify? Let's focus on the word verify. I understand.
Correct.
If you're a seller, you give them your email and you give them a working phone number. What does it take for them to verify that? Kind of the same question. And I'm going to ask for whatever the next two are.
Mm-hmm.
How do they verify?
Again, I think every company would do it a different way, but we all have email addresses. And how many times I know I do, log on to my Gmail account from a computer that my Gmail account is not familiar with. And I'm going to get an email that I can look on my phone and say, hey, did you do this here? Can you verify that you did this here? And that's just a casual thing. I mean, it's set up in an algorithm to do. I, again, can't give, I represent the retail association and not those folks. So I'll speak to what I can speak to. But some of this, if you look at verifying an ID for your contact information, a copy of your ID. If I was going to lease retail space anywhere in the state of Georgia now, I would have to provide a copy of my ID. That's just to enter into that contract to lease from someone to do business. I would have to provide that and a lot of this other information as well. So with the contact information, I think that is fairly self-explanatory.
So if it's an individual, okay, so they have to provide an email address, a working phone number, and if they're an individual, they have to provide a valid ID. And if they are not an individual, government issued photo ID. What is that?
If you're acting on behalf of someone, if you are an agent for someone.
I don't understand. If you're if you're not an individual, but you're an entity. Correct.
So what would be an entity acting on behalf of someone? An LLC? And you and everyone here, members of the committee, or most of y'all, and are a lot smarter than I, and have JDs, and I admittedly don't, but there are many different facets that an entity could be doing business instead of an individual. Different forms of corporations, LLC.
So what you're saying is whoever, whether it be the registered agent or the listed CEO or CFO, that somebody that has the capacity to bind the entity.
Absolutely.
And
if you do that, you're going to have those tax documents on behalf of that.
And so I haven't had a chance to examine 128 through 132 through that lens, but I am curious if the language, if that's what it actually says, and I assume it does. I just haven't
Absolutely
done that yet. So number 3, a tax ID number. Business
tax ID number, whether you're a business or an individual, a tax ID number, if you're doing business, which if you're dealing in the volume of what we're talking about in new and unused products, you are a business.
Okay. So again, to our friends that have a different perspective on this, I want, what I'm interested in is all of these things, why this isn't reasonable, why it's risky, why there's liability, why it's overburdensome, et cetera. What's the fourth one?
The fourth one is whether or not you're exclusively offering the product on that online marketplace.
Okay. So tell us what that means.
Well, if you have the same product, essentially the same listing, but you're doing the same product, I'm selling it on Amazon, but I'm also selling it over here on eBay. I'm selling it on Facebook Marketplace or what have you. Just to know where else it can be found.
So let me read this. Whether the high volume third-party seller is exclusively advertising or offering the consumer product or products exclusively on the online marketplace, or if the high volume third-party seller is currently advertising in the same.
I hate to.
What's the purpose of this?
I was going to, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. What's the purpose of that?
The purpose of that is, in my understanding, the purpose of that is so that we can further find these counterfeit and or stolen or fraudulent products. We obviously aren't asking for folks to, competitors to advertise for each other. But for us, it's an easier way to track our loss prevention folks and law enforcement to track where these goods end up. And I think it's important for consumers to know. In fact, if you look later on in the bill, and I think this is an appropriate time to bring this up as well, after we discuss contact information and into this, we're asking that an online marketplace would disclose not everything that we talked about, obviously not bank account information, but to consumers, the contact information of the third-party seller, who they are, where they are, a way to get a hold of them, either by phone or by email, and whether or not they are selling, whether they manufacture or import these goods, and whether or not they're selling exclusively on one individual marketplace.
Okay, so what I want to know is, and Sains has a question, and I'm going to get to him, but we can come back to this, but before I lose my train of thought, which I guarantee you I will, who doesn't do that? And let's pull out forget about number 4, the information about where they sell, other places they sell. What online marketplaces do not make contact information and the way to get a verifiable way to find the seller? Who doesn't do that?
I'm not an online marketplace, so I can't tell you who does or who does not do that. But what we're talking about is they very well may. In fact, I know on some listing, look,
let me say, for us to understand what the problem, that there is a problem, and I'm not putting you on the spot, but this is the kind of thing that we need to know, like, to address the problem, what is the scope of the problem? And I don't know. I don't even know how many, eBay and Amazon are about the only things I know about. I don't even know what else is out there that sells, as far as online marketplace, but you understand what I'm saying, though.
I understand your question.
I need to know how prevalent this is, where there are.
I understand your question, sir, and I think I can answer it in the way that you're seeking. It doesn't matter, in my opinion, who does or does not do it. It's whether the information, whether they do it or not, is accurate. It all comes back down to verification that the person that is selling on these marketplaces are who they say that they are. And I'm not, again, I think we've been over this, that not everyone that's selling on these marketplaces are exhibiting this behavior. I think it is rare, but I think this helps suss it out. I could probably go on an online marketplace, again, which one, I don't think it matters, but I could put a fake phone number, and I could put a fake address, and I could put a fake name, and I could be selling counterfeit makeup or counterfeit lotion or stolen power tools or what have you. And at the end of the day, if someone has an issue, if law enforcement is investigating, if companies are bringing a complaint that my proprietary stuff is there, and I reach out to that phone number and I get because it's not verified. That's the point.
Let me go to Sains and then I think McLaurin and Mr. Chairman, if you have anything. Sains.
Let the record reflect. I was on Facebook trying to find Facebook Marketplace, but I was going to defend him, but apparently, anyways, I got two questions and I'm referring to line 94 through 98. In terms of the definition of a high volume seller, practical, I'm trying to correlate this to a practical application in my mind. We had I had a constituent, lady that decided to make face masks and take the revenue she got from it and support a local food bank and sold it at $50 a piece. If she were to have sold more than 200 masks and for some reason people decided to buy it, would she then on Facebook, she used Facebook Marketplace, would she then be liable to give information? She wouldn't have a business license or anything like that. So what would that do in her situation if this were law?
That's a very good question, Representative, and thank you for it. But if you go back up to lines 91, she would be an individual manufacturing something that is not a trademark good, not protected in commerce. So she wouldn't be held to that. And which is exactly why we altered that to make it easier on individuals like that are manufacturing things.
So when you say distributed in commerce, you're saying because a handmade mask isn't distributed in commerce?
No, it absolutely is distributed in commerce, but she is an individual that is manufacturing it.
Okay.
And those items aren't really reproductions, facsimiles, or imitations of a trademark good.
Okay.
She's making a handmade mask.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
McLaurin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So some of this discussion has been revolving around what information an online marketplace naturally has access to or easily has access to and who these online marketplaces are. I have an issue with the way online marketplace is defined. Actually, a couple issues. One concern I have is that it seems to create an infinite definitional loop with third-party seller. I don't know if this has been raised, but so from 99 to 102, we see that an online marketplace is electronically based or access platform. To me, that could be as broad as a website that includes features that facilitate third-party sellers to engage in the following. So that's the second issue I'm going to come to in a minute, is how broad that is, but it incorporates the definition of third-party sellers. So if you go to 105 to 107, one of the definitions of third-party seller, one aspect of it is it could be an owner of an online marketplace. So online marketplaces, that's built into the definition of third-party seller in a way that kind of creates almost like circular definitions.
Definitions and a definition.
Yeah, they refer back to one another. So, let's say I have a garage lemonade stand, on my sidewalk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see why that would be excluded from this like sort of infinite loop fractal problem, right? To me, it would make sense to ensure that third-party seller did not incorporate a reference to online marketplace, just to make sure that's not an infinite loop. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Yes, sir.
Okay. That's the first thing to highlight. The second thing is, what if I'm a third-party seller that uses an online accounting software like QuickBooks or something, and it's hosted on a website? That would be an electronically based or access platform that includes features that facilitate me to engage in all of those business activities.
Yes, sir, Representative. And I think that goes to the exact same point the chairman was making earlier, is and hosts one or more third-party sellers.
Okay.
Yeah, a QuickBooks or a service provider like that is not hosting the third-party
Right.
sellers.
Well, but okay, and sorry if I missed that exact point from the chair, but the word hosts, if you're providing services online, you see what I'm saying? I'm just
Yes.
pulling at this. Like the chair was saying, if you've got a redirect to PayPal to do your payment processing, if you've got any sort of web-based business software or platform that you use, theoretically, you've got every vendor that third-party seller touches could become an online marketplace for purposes of the bill.
I think theoretically, but I don't think practically in the construct of the bill. I think that you're making the word hosts do a lot of lifting there.
I guess it could. I mean, I think this is the kind of thing where, business periodicals are going to have a big headline like, who is subject to these new reporting requirements? ? What does hosts mean? And then a whole bunch of businesses are going to have to run through this process of figuring out what they do or don't have to do under this. And I guess maybe my thought would be if this is all going to stay in, I would want hosts to be clearer, or I'd want there to be more clarity on, what exactly. So like maybe consumer facing, some sort of concept that links up the idea that the consumer is making a transaction via the interface, I think would make it tighter. And again, back to the other point about third-party seller, it'd be good to remove a circular reference. That's all.
And you're looking at in the circular reference, you're looking at online marketplace in line 106.
Yeah, and I think that it would make sense to me to take out the online marketplace in 106 rather than try to do anything with the other definition, because this is, online marketplace is the one that you're going to need to define in terms of third-party sellers. So I think third-party seller you should find a way not to use online marketplace there.
I'm going to jump in here. I appreciate you standing in here and answering these tough questions.
Yeah.
But you can understand it. It's very hard for us to grasp this. And many times we've talked about essentially bringing parity to the e-commerce with our brick and mortars. And you touched on item 4 on lines 135. Do you know if we currently require brick and mortar to tell us where else they're selling? That's one part of the question. The second part of the question is, it seems to me in the retail business, you kind of don't want to divulge some of that stuff, because if you're selling it at discount here and selling it for, one cost here, then you might not want everybody to know that.
Absolutely. I think that, to your first question, in I guess brick and mortar retail, I don't think I have an answer for that. In fact, could you repeat the question? I have been standing up here for a minute, and I know if y'all's brains are hurting, I'm trying to keep up.
So and there's many of us and one of you, so I appreciate you standing in. Again, we're asking to divulge this information, or at least the online marketplace to request this information. And is that one of the items that we're going to post for people to see? I think it is.
Yes, sir.
Do we do this for brick and mortar retail? So do we say to any other retail that's a brick and mortar store you can go into, where else are you selling or advertising whatever you're selling in this store?
No, so I don't believe that's a general practice in physical retail. No,
Okay.
sir.
And then the second part is, it seems to me that, and I'm not a retailer, but that some of that stuff might be, I don't want to say trade secret, but it's as part of the business model. I'm selling it for, a discounted price over at, ABC discount, but I'm selling it at, high-end retail for this amount. So it just gives me pause about number 4. And so I wanted to see what your thoughts are on that.
And let me ask something too about number 4. I understand the spirit of this is we're trying to make the online marketplace a safer place to do commerce. I get that, and I 100% support this. 1, 2, and 3 are really about making sure that the marketplace has the information that can aid and assist the consumer if the consumer were to receive. All right, I don't know if I'm saying this right. This is how complicated this all is. 1, 2, and 3 are more about gathering information that very well may be used to aid and assist the consumer if they've gotten something fraudulent, etc. Number 4, the spirit of number 4 is fine, but number 4 is really in the spirit of helping retailers be able to track down offenders who are the bad players.
Absolutely.
And so we've kind of got 1, 2, and 3 are directed at one thing, and number 4 is directed at someone else or something else. Am I seeing that right? And hey, is the part of number 4, and again, I don't know now that I understand this a whole lot better now than I did. Well, yeah, this is
Wonderful.
Something's working. It's very slow, and hopefully everybody else is ahead of me. But is number 4 better accomplished as an independent effort of this, or is number 4? And I'm not asking, or I'm not telling or suggesting. I'm just asking. That there seems, so number 4 seems to have a different placement of what it's attempting to accomplish. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I think I'm a little confused by your question, Mr. Chairman.
I think number 1, 2, and 3 is about protecting
Right.
the consumer. Number 4 is about aiding the retailers in being able to try to track down the online marketplaces that are the offenders that are.
No, I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, I have no shame in saying that would assist us, but simultaneously that would also assist. I mean, it would assist us. It would assist retailers of all sizes more easily track down where their stolen property is and have the potential to identify it. I think that's the best answer that I have for you at the moment, sir.
McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. One concern I do share about that particular provision is that piece of information I would think it would be more fluid than the other pieces of information. And so there are requirements throughout the bill about updating the information, which would kick in if you were to either start or stop offering those products in other places. You'd basically have to keep a complete report current with any online marketplace you use regarding every place that you were selling. And so that to me strikes me as a little over the top in terms of burden compared to the rest of it.
And on that, I would ask our friends that have a different perspective on this bill to comment on that very thing when the time comes. Is for your thoughts on that.
So just moving, I'm not moving, but moving the chair. The chair does as he pleases, obviously. But so once we gather this information, then the online marketplace then just posts it. That's what they have to do. Post it conspicuously near the item for sale. Is that what the bill is going to do?
Yes, sir. Later on in the bill, I believe.
And I don't want to skip anything, so I'm just
No, I mean,
trying to-
they're related.
So
Okay.
They are.
Once it's C1 in line 139, the online marketplace shall verify paragraph 1 above, which is the bank information.
Correct.
And they've got 3 business days to gather and verify it. Is that correct? And this previously changed from 24 hours, right?
Though the 24-hour change, sir, occurred in line 115 where it says 3 business days. Initially, it was within 24 hours of a seller becoming a third-party seller, becoming a high-volume third-party seller. They would have had 24 hours to provide this information if they had not already. That was a bit hasty that we thought. We heard the testimony from last week and we decided to change that to 3 business days. Also throughout the bill, anytime that there was a mention of days, we did include business days to provide a little more flexibility with compliance.
Understood. Well, this circles me back to the high volume third party. Is $5,000 and 200 transactions or discrete sales? Is that arbitrary, or is that based on some type of formula? Like, this is what we think.
A coalition of folks in the industry feel that is the appropriate threshold at which to verify information of a seller.
All right.
All right. How does this, again, I just want to talk practically here. How does this delivery, you're the online, who's providing to who again? The seller is providing to the online marketplace this information?
Correct. And the online marketplace verifies.
How does do they email it? Do they, how do they get this information to them? Is it all, I mean, I don't have the first clue how this works. How would that information get to them? Is there a standard way? And then if we're passing bank information through an email in order to achieve this requirement, then does that pose a risk? Talk me through this. How does I am on this a whole lot more than I was.
Okay.
Feel good about that.
Yes, sir.
But here's where, tell us how that information gets from the seller to the marketplace, and talk about the risk of, we all know every time we send an email, it's possible that, somebody's hacked it. So
I think it would be incumbent on the marketplaces to probably answer that question. They know how they collect the information that they do collect now. And I'm sure that when they collect it, I'm sure they do it in a very safe and responsible manner of sensitive information, such as bank account information and how they handle that. And so I couldn't speak to that. And I wouldn't speak to that other than to assume that our friends in the online marketplace would do the best they can. I think we all do, even brick and mortar, when we're handling that kind of sensitive information. We're all very sensitive to the customers and the vendors that we serve.
So in your mind, what kind of liability is presented to these e-commerce folks if we were to pass this and they were to verify say we can get that worked out, whatever the account is, whether it's PayPal or bank account or whatever, say we get that worked out. So what kind of liability arises for them if somebody essentially hoodoos them, or?
I would say that there's no increased liability. I think it would be the same standard as it is now for data security, and hopefully here in Georgia for everybody, we can make that a little better. I think to my previous point, everyone does the best that they can. But I don't think that this increases the liability for an online marketplace, because again, in so many instances, this is information, especially the bank account information, is information that they already have.
So the extra step then is in requiring the verification, depending on how that
Correct.
information is disseminated to whoever the verifier is.
Correct.
If they're whatever, when I say transaction, I'm not talking money. I'm talking sending, getting information from A to B, and then whatever information comes back from the verifier. Is there inherent risk with that? Is there cyber risk with that? And these are all questions that I think that I would like to hear addressed from the folks that, again, have a different perspective on this.
I think that to answer your question, since you asked, and I'd love to hear their answer as well, but I think that any digital transaction carries with it a certain level of inherent risk. But I think that the people that operate in this space are sophisticated enough and secure enough and know what's at stake to protect the important and sensitive data that they would need to protect.
So what I would like to do, unless somebody else wants to say something else, move us on to number 3. I'm sorry, D, letter D in line 162. And this is the online marketplace shall require the high volume third-party seller to disclose to consumers in a conspicuous manner identifying information. So again, we're in kindergarten. What does this mean? Tell us what happens now, what's required now, who does this already, who doesn't do this already. What does this mean? What does it mean to disclose to consumers in a conspicuous manner? Just start from kind of the beginning with this and help us understand.
Yes, sir. I would say once again, I can't speak to who's doing what and how they do it on the online marketplace side. What I can speak to is what this bill would do. This information would be verified by the online marketplace. Conspicuous would be so the consumer can reasonably see it. So with whom you're doing business. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the product listing by the bill, but it does have to be on the high volume third-party vendors page.
Is there a better way to phrase that? I mean, I don't know that when I read that, that's how it reads to me.
Okay.
And we don't have to resolve that today, but so how is this information in an ideal world? How do you, in your ideal world on this, somebody engages in e-commerce on an online marketplace. How does this information come to them, or how is it available to them? in a conspicuous manner.
In a conspicuous manner. As I see it, I go to a product listing or a third-party seller's page on an online marketplace. There's a name, there is a location, and there is a way to contact that third-party seller, whether they be an individual or a business. It's as simple as that. I don't think it's any more complicated. What is important, though, and I think I'd try to jump ahead and maybe answer your next question is, well, what if that is a residential address? What if that is a personal phone number? What would we be doing to protect that?
What if it's an address in China?
And they put the address in China and they verify the address is in China so that you can acknowledge if I wanted to just buy American products and I only wanted to do business with an American company, what's preventing a Chinese company now from creating a false listing? Again, John Smith, Mesa, Arizona, and that's where you think that that's who you think you're doing business with. This is just this is purely a consumer benefit to you can know exactly with whom you're doing business.
You got me at Buy American, so I appreciate that fact. I do want to say this, though. The purpose for these facilitators is essentially to make money from selling these goods. If we give them the phone number and I'm the buyer and I'm like, well, I can just call John Smith and knock out, this facilitator.
I don't think that would be the case, sir. I think that
That's the case. I've done that on eBay. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Why are you telling on yourself?
I'm just saying.
I hope the online marketplaces bring that up when they come up. No, I don't think anything prevents that. What prevents someone from looking in the yellow pages, if anyone has that now? What prevents someone from Googling who has that and finding the direct result of who that is now?
That's a good point.
And I would say in a great many instances, the online marketplaces and to brag on those folks. I mean, they do facilitate a service for a lot of small businesses. Unfortunately, they facilitate a service sometimes for legitimate small businesses. This is consumer protection. This allows people to know with who they're dealing. And again, if you look further in the bill, in section E, in line 180, we contemplate, well, what if it's a residential address? Well, if they can prove that that's a residential address, the information could be limited to city or to state and country. If you look at 187, if you have a different facility, if you contract with someone who handles your returns, that can serve as your contact address, the location, as it were, of where you're doing business. And if you look at line 191, it contemplates the phone number. If I just have my cell phone that I'm doing business with as a high volume third-party seller, and that's all I've got, an email address would suffice. At the end of the day, it lets people know with whom they're doing business and also gives them a direct recourse that they know they would have if they have a problem with their goods, if their goods are stolen, if their goods are fraudulent, if they think they're buying Legos and they get logos, well, they know who they can go after.
Let me ask you this. Number 3 and number 5 within this, which is lines 169. Whether the high volume third party seller also engages in manufacturing, importing, or reselling of consumer products. What does that achieve? That requiring that information to be given to the buyer.
I'm having to switch gears in my mind real quick, Mr. Chairman. Just give me 1 second. Again, I think it's just more of a know with who you're doing. If you're doing business with someone who's imported, I mean, I think it does exactly what it says it does, and just providing more information to Georgia consumers.
What about number 5? Number 5, any other information determined to be necessary to address circumvention or evasion of the requirements of this subsection.
That would be up to the online marketplace to decide if they wanted to include on their platforms. This would be the baseline. If they wanted to require the high volume third party sellers doing business on their platforms to disclose anything else, they wouldn't be statutorily limited to do that.
So is it your position that number 5 does not create a legal obligation on their behalf? That's just putting in code that if they want, we want to hold you to standard here, silver standard, but if you want to hold yourself to the gold standard, you could do that?
Absolutely.
Is it necessary to put it in law? That's what I'm
I think it is necessary to put, even though that's not a change, if you go to line 216, based on testimony that we heard last week, that this legislation would somehow limit an online marketplace's ability to do whatever they imagine they needed to do to combat this practice. We included section I there on 216 that again, this is the floor and there is no ceiling. I don't believe it creates a legal obligation, but it spells out, based on concerns that we had previously heard, that this is the floor. This is to your thing. This is the silver standard. The gold is out there, and then go see what you would do it however you would like.
Representative Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. I believe from our other meeting that we had that Georgia will be the first state to come up with a scheme such as this one that's very complicated. What do you think that? So are there any other less cumbersome ways to identify these potential stolen goods that are not creating all these complicated scheme that could affect obviously businesses that are doing transactions legally in the online market?
I would say that while this is a conversation, and thank you, Representative, this is a conversation that is happening at the federal level, as we discussed previously. Lots getting done up there. We're proud to bring this. We're proud to be on the vanguard of this because we think that this is important. And we do not feel that this is onerous to Georgia's small businesses. Will it create another step for online marketplaces to ensure that Georgia consumers are protected? Yes, it will. And we feel that that is the role of the state of Georgia. And we're proud to bring this and have these conversations and have this legislation contemplated really on behalf of the retail industry. I mean, the state of Georgia has an opportunity here. This is a brand new issue. I do believe that a similar bill was passed out of a committee in Oklahoma. Obviously, we're trying to beat those guys because we want to protect our consumers before they get the chance to protect theirs and really be a leader in this space. Yes, ma'am.
McLaurin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. At the risk of becoming the chair's hype guy today.
Be careful there. Once you do that, you may never go back. So
that is terrifying. You know, I think that the chair is right to point out that there are divergent interests that the bill has taken on. You know, originally the bill, and I guess maybe this wasn't the chair's exact point, but it speaks to two different types of policy aims that are reflected in this part and throughout the bill. That originally this was about frustrating retail crime from the perspective of the businesses that were hurt by the crime. And there's now this consumer protection angle to the bill that has to do a lot more with intellectual property as opposed to actual goods being lost. And so I think that maybe it would be good to at least, again, if this part's going to stay in, to trim down some of the pieces of it that aren't clearly one or the other, or just more about control, you know, as opposed to having a clearly identifiable interest. And so I agree with the chair's point that, you know, for example, if it reads to me just in terms of plain language of the statute for lines 169 to 170, that you could comply with that by just listing almost like an asterisk, this seller engages in either manufacturing, importing, or reselling of consumer products. But I don't know what that sentence would mean to anybody. And so I think if we just keep a critical eye about, I would just like to know if we're going to keep this in, that we know exactly what the purpose of the unified part is. And if it really is consumer protection, that's the standard I'd want to use for going through line by line, essentially.
And Representative, thank you for the statement and the question and the thought, and obviously enjoy the conversations with you. I would say that though consumer protection and frustrating organized retail crime are not mutually exclusive. I believe that in this instance, in this language, and in this policy, they reside in the same universe because they are doing the same thing at the same time.
Too soon. Thanks. I would agree, although I think if we're not clearly thinking about what it's kind of, we're using a vehicle that was responding to retail crime to start with. And I think that from a drafting standpoint, that makes it easier to just put in provisions that sound in the original response to retail crime. But I think that if especially for a portion of the bill that's contested, if there's going to be a case made that it should stay in, it would be smart, right, to say, what exactly is the purpose of this? And can we identify, apart from the bill, kind of to the chair's point about, we're talking about it in isolation. What is the purpose of this section in isolation? If it's and I agree it's not mutually exclusive, but I think, putting some salt on retail, response to retail crime, salt on a consumer protection part is going to make it more controversial, potentially for no reason. I mean, I'm almost trying to say it would help frame up the issue better for the dispute that's being had if this portion were limited to only those things that were clearly about consumer protection or prevention of IP, infringement, right?
And in candor, I did recommend at the beginning of the session that these be combined because of their similarities in the retail world. I know when we kind of get in and really break it down, we're talking about two different things, but it was my recommendation to put this in all as one thing. I think that within, I think that Section 3 does fit in the context of Section 2 in a more general sense, but I think that within Section 3, we've kind of got these two concepts, and are they best dealt with together as they are now, or are they best dealt with in Section 3, Section 4, et cetera, and so, and I don't think we don't have to determine that today. I think what's important right now is that we're talking through this, we're visually seeing these things now. So why don't we continue to get through? But I realize that this is taking a long time, but I have to say that I am personally finding a tremendous amount of value in what we're doing right now. So letter E.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think I'm setting a personal record for standing before the United Civil Committee.
No, that is not a personal record.
Personal
for
record
you.
for me.
Okay, yeah,
That's
okay,
right.
yeah.
It's a big
It's not a committee record, but we'll see how this goes.
Everybody
So,
starts somewhere.
all right, tell us what E. Talk to us about E, line 177.
Okay. So again, it's what I just covered on the partial disclosure of required information that would be available to a consumer. If your address that your business or you are operating out of as an individual is a residential address, you can prove that to the online marketplace. That's partial disclosure. You can list your state and country as to where you're located. We don't want to dox anybody. We don't want to provide the sensitive information of folks' home or personal phone number. We believe in protecting consumers, but we also, and fighting organized retail crime, but we also want to keep the sanctity of privacy.
So E is tied directly to number 5 above,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
number 5 is kind of your catch-all if you want to do more.
No, E is tied particularly to.
Well, it says
line
paragraph 5 of
167.
subsection D.
167. Paragraph 5 of subsection.
Paragraph 5
Right,
of
right,
D
right.
is 174 through 176, which is number 5.
Okay.
So the way I read this, whether it's written right or not,
Yep.
is that E branches off of number 5 conceptually.
Conceptually, and I don't know. I will have to get back to you on that one, sir. But beyond that, though, is the partial allows for the partial disclosure of the information that I'd previously discussed.
So is this written wrong then? Because how would it allow? Tell me how we get to a place where we allow for a partial disclosure on something that's number 5 is not mandatory. I'm confused again.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of right there with you on that, but no. Would that not be a reference to 162? I believe it should be a reference to the D on 162.
It says paragraph D.
Yeah.
D required under paragraph 5 of subsection D. So that would be line 174. But if the intention, it just might be a drafting
It might be
issue.
a drafting issue. Looks like it might pertain to 2. Is that right? Physical address?
Physical
Subsection?
address and, yes, the physical address of, yep, that's it. That would be correct. Or probably 2 and 4.
So I don't understand again. I thought that
I believe that's a drafting
I
error.
think in 2 and 4, but let's say that it is 2
Yeah.
and 4. We're saying that they shall require the
No, it may require.
any on D in 162, any online marketplace shall require high volume third seller to disclose to consumers in a conspicuous manner the following information. So 2
Mhm.
is full physical address, 4 is contact information, and then E we're saying partial. I don't. What am I missing?
Because if you're an entity, if you are a business, if you have a business phone number and you have a business address, yes, full disclosure. But if that business address is also your residential address, it provides for partial disclosure. If that business phone number is also your personal phone number,
Oh, I see. And
it
only
provides
has
for a
a
partial
residential
disclosure.
street address. Okay, I
Correct.
see. Okay, there might be a drafting issue in there, McLaurin.
I think you could just say subsection D, and I think it would be fine because the scenarios are specific enough. I mean, I guess you could specify 2 and 4, but just for lack of, any sort of
Okay.
trip up, I think you just take out paragraph 5 of.
All right, so let's
Or
move
the
on
identity- yeah, under
to
paragraph
F, unless somebody else has any questions about E. This is the accountability. Pretty much places the burden on the online marketplace if
FN 196 is the ability of an online marketplace to revoke the partial disclosure if the high volume third party seller has been disingenuous in applying for that.
so. Now we're still we're pinging off of now. F is pinging off of E, right? E is partial disclosures,
Yes.
and F basically says that if the online marketplace becomes aware
sir.
that
Yes,
somebody
sir.
is
Right. It provides for the revocation of that partial disclosure.
an online marketplace. So G, does anybody have any questions about F? Okay, so walk us through the rest of the bill, or walk us through the rest of section 3.
We're
Hey,
almost
Tom,
okay.
before you go off of F, so tell me what's going to happen there run me through the fact pattern that F is what's wrong.
If it has come to light by an online marketplace that high volume third party seller had been disingenuous in applying for partial disclosure, they made a misrepresentation that phone number was their personal phone number, that address was their residential address. It removes that and would require the full disclosure of
Okay.
the information
All right. Thank you.
that they
Sorry.
were disingenuous about.
Sorry, Chairman.
McLaurin.
I think that subsection E on line 204 should probably read subsection D if that's the intent, because the full disclosure requirements are from D, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, that's something that can be looked at.
Yeah.
So talk to us about the rest of the section, G, H, I, and J.
And guys, we're almost there, and I appreciate your patience with me, and I appreciate your questions.
I cannot tell you how much clearer I see this than I did. So this has been painful, but very helpful.
It's been fun.
No, it hasn't.
Sick person. In line 206, section G, it basically allows for an electronic, so an email or telephonic reporting of suspicious activity if to the marketplace. So it would, if you're looking at listings and you're saying, well, that looks fraudulent, or I received something that was fraudulent, that looks stolen, that looks counterfeit, then it gives an ability, clear ability, not hidden in a back page somewhere, not in small print at the bottom, but a clear ability for a consumer to report the suspicious retail crime or other fraudulent activity to the online marketplace. That's what that does. I think that's fairly clear.
Would you think that the star rating would work for that or no?
I mean, does that bring up a different question of if someone is selling stolen or fraudulent goods, should they have a 5-star rating?
That's my question. Do you
Right.
think that meets the subsection? Because you hit the star and then you go into all the reviews and does that?
They could. I mean, they could put the reviews there and you could have 5 stars. But what we're talking about is me as a consumer being able to go to the marketplace and go, hey, you need to check these guys out. I don't think something quite looks or smells right here.
What is, all right, so what is suspicious marketplace activity? Is it's undefined on purpose?
I mean, I believe that is. I mean, if you're seeing something that, and this is also beneficial in the retail crime aspect for loss prevention and law enforcement to go, well, we've tracked X amount of stolen goods. This is what they are. This looks like them, smells like them, is a way to directly contact the marketplace and be able to cooperate with them to suss that out.
Representative Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before we got into the partial versus full disclosure, I was thinking about how this is cumbersome to the third-party seller. I guess that was the definition of the seller. And now I'm thinking about how is this cumbersome on the marketplaces, whether they're trying to identify, okay, is this seller now subject to the partial disclosure, to the full disclosure? How I don't know how would that be justified in the volume of how much that would create to make those decisions and who's now subject to the partial versus the full, or whether they're lying or not lying in a non-line world, I guess.
I don't have a clear answer for you, Representative, and I'm sorry for that because I don't know how the internals of an online marketplace or these online marketplaces work. But I do have a suspicion that with the intellectual talent that they have and the abilities they have to do what they have now, I can't imagine that this is too terribly onerous. I mean, just to be frank, as I've said before, we're talking about some of the largest technological companies in the world that affect us every day. I think it's also very onerous, and to bring that word, I think I've said that word more this week than I have in my entire life. I also think it's incredibly onerous for businesses in Georgia to have to compete with these third-party market or these third-party, high-volume third-party sellers that are selling stolen, fraudulent, and counterfeit goods.
I have I think everybody on the committee knows I do a lot of hiking. In fact, one of my hiking friends is in the audience right now, and I buy a lot of Arc'teryx equipment. And obviously the internet knows that I do that. And sometimes when I'm on Facebook, I'll get this ad that Arc'teryx jackets for $69 or $72, which those are like $500 jackets. And I have reported that to Facebook because I would prefer if this went away. And I have tried to get it to go away, and I've reported it, and it just keeps coming back. But I don't really know how or why that works, but I guess that would be an example of, at least for me personally, as I engage in social media, e-commerce, that's suspicious marketplace activity because it's clearly fraudulent.
Right. You're absolutely right.
And so this would require the marketplace to have a reporting mechanism. So my question is, like, for example, Facebook has a reporting mechanism. It doesn't work, obviously, but who doesn't? What platforms out there do not offer currently this type of reporting mechanism? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Who does not do this?
I can't speak to that. I don't know who does what in that space.
So talk to us about, let's finish this up. H.
Wonderful. So Section H, beginning on line 216, or I'm sorry, Section 211. That's product mixing, and I believe we talked about that. That addresses that if you order, so if it's a marketplace that warehouses, distributes, or otherwise fulfills, if you're doing that on behalf of a third-party vendor, which sometimes happen, you're not taking, if if the marketplace is selling a widget that is the marketplace's widget, and a third party, high volume third party seller selling the same widget, right? Or allegedly the same widget, and they're fulfilling that order from their warehouse. So if I order the widget and it comes from the third party person, they have to let me know. They can't dump it all into the same bin and then just pull it out. And I forget what the industry
Meaning the
term for that is.
marketplace, they're required to,
If they're fulfilling the order of a high volume third party seller, which happens, they have to say that that's where that product came from.
that it came from the third party or that it came from them.
That it came from the third party. That the product no matter where you ordered it from, it originated from that high volume third party seller. That's a bit more of an esoteric, I think, concept in the Howard one we've been talking. But I think I can let.
I was going to ask you to keep on fleshing it out, but I was going to just
No,
hold my, I was pausing to see that you were.
I'm
So-
here. I'm here.
So if you order the widget and on the online marketplace, it says that ABC high volume seller is selling it, but it comes from the online marketplace's their warehouse, they
Mhm.
still need to.
They have to just disclose that it's that widget.
Bodie, what number are you? Okay. Representative Bodie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
I have that backwards, and I'll get to that after you, Representative Bodie. I'm sorry.
Yes, well, I just want to ask one question, and we appreciate you being very detail oriented today. As far as the prosecution or the enforcement of this particular code section, I see that you refer to the Georgia Law Department. Would the Attorney General's office be involved in the enforcement of this? And the reason why is that I understand the premise of the legislation, but this is very complex legalese and statutory interpretation. And I just want to make sure that we don't put something on our local DAs that might be, you get what I'm going.
I might can answer this question.
Well,
The Consumer Protection, the Fair Business Practices Act, which is the Georgia Consumer Protection Act. I think I said this in the last hearing. I've litigated that act in several cases. I've defended it and used it as a plaintiff. And there is some tie-in. The Attorney General's office has a division that is over, consumer protection type matters. And there are some calls in the statute for the Fair Business Practices Act where you're required, when you serve your lawsuit, you're required to serve notice on the Attorney General's office, et cetera. So I think the two are, there's a wedding that happens with these. And I don't think that it's not something it's something that would be directed to a department in the AG's office that's what they exist for. It wouldn't be something that would be cumbersome or overburdensome for a regular prosecutor's office. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, you might be able to answer this, and I don't know if we're okay with entertaining this. Would you think it might be clear for us to put that in the statute itself, so that way that we know who's going to actually have to deal with this? So it's no ambiguity there. I understand because you practice that area of the law, but I think we need to say that this statute needs to be enforced by the AG or law department, because I just wouldn't want to put that type of burden on our local DAs.
I mean, we could certainly look at that.
Okay.
I don't think, if you're making this isn't a prosecution under this isn't a criminal prosecution. This is a civil action. A consumer can sue under the Fair Business Practice Act. A consumer can file a lawsuit. It's a very, the statute calls for treble damages. So it has a lot of upside, and that's designed to bring accountability to the consumer marketplace. There is no criminal prosecution. It is it's a civil case that the Attorney General has civil jurisdiction over.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bodie, to further answer your question, and it goes back to some conversations that we were having earlier, is under the Consumer Protection Division, when you're writing the rules and regs on the collection and verification of the information, that would be under the purview of the Attorney General's office and the Consumer Protection Division.
Okay, McLaurin.
Thank you. Just so I understand, is that FBPA cause of action intended to attach to both potentially an online marketplace and a third-party seller using it? Because I guess there's duties created by the code section for both, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm just asking more what the intention is. Is it supposed to be a hammer for the third-party seller, the smaller businesses, or is it for the online marketplace?
I believe that I would let the committee discuss that of what they thought that would mean.
And that's an interesting question. And I mean, I would think that your cause of action, your bad player, unless the marketplace was an active part in a fraudulent transactions or, counterfeit, whatever we want to call it, then perhaps it could be argued that they would be subject, but otherwise I think it would be the seller. I don't know how you prove your cause of action against the, kind of the third party marketplace that may or may not have, enough knowledge to have any idea that that's going on. I mean, imagine it could be circumstantially driven, but I don't know the answer. That's something that we should definitely, one of the things that we need to discuss with this.
Because my reading of it is, the private right under 399 basically says any person who suffers injury or damages as a result of the violation. So I don't know that there even is, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Tell me what line are you looking at?
So 10.1399 is the private right of action provision in the.
Oh, that's the Fair Business Practice Act.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's if I could be so risky as to use the phrase mens rea in this committee.
No, he didn't.
Every time.
There's no requirement that, a person knowingly violate. I think if you violate, then somebody has standing potentially claim for damages, they can assert it under the title. So that's
we would have to look at that. And the Fair Business Practice, if you go back earlier, again, I only know this because I've had several cases. I think it may be 392 or some earlier statute. It actually lists out about 50 types of examples of things that are subject to the Fair Business Practice Act. And then it has language that's more of and other similar. So there's a lot of open-endedness to that on purpose. And I think it's fact-driven, but that's something that we definitely, I think that we would be wise to get an answer on.
Because this makes it per se. I think that's really what it comes down to is, the statute itself is broad, as you're saying, but this provision says shall be treated as a violation. So you get all the way to a violation of FPPA, and it's just a question of standing damages, whatever at that point. So that's pretty strong. I think it's just worth thinking about.
All right. We have, I think your time is up, Mr. Busey.
Aw, so soon.
So,
thank you, Mr.
what time
Chairman.
is it? 3:25. Okay. Is there anybody else? And this is taking a very long time, but it is extremely helpful. So we're just going to have to bear down and keep bulldozing through this. With the group that is working with you, Mr. Busey, on this, is there anybody else that has complimentary discussion to add to this? And is there, tell us who's here and kind of where they would be subject to being able to help and assist the committee?
Absolutely. I think that with the people that were here, we have Glenn Wilkins with Walmart, Brian Hudson with Home Depot, and I believe if she's still online, Sally West with Walgreens to speak to different aspects of why this is good and needed policy in the state of Georgia. I think we've covered probably the language from our side sufficiently.
Okay, so what I would like to do is have those parties talk for a couple of minutes each. If you have something to add that we need to know, I mean, you could talk to us in general about the concept, and I've actually asked you to be here to do that today. But if there is something that we've discussed that you sense confusion in or that you can help, then we would welcome you to offer that information as well. So why don't we start online with the Walgreens, what was the name? Miss West. Miss West, can you unmute and talk to us?
Hey, good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Hey,
can y'all hear me?
we can. Yes, ma'am.
Hey, I'm Sally West, Director of Government Relations for Walgreens, and I'm not sure if I can follow Mr. Busey's act today and getting so in the weeds in this bill. I think he did a great job, and thank you so much for all of your questions about this. I just real quickly wanted to share why this is important. Not only to my company, but why it's important to Georgia consumers, and just give a different aspect than what maybe you've heard from Home Depot or others to this point. One of our largest categories of items stolen out of Walgreens are over-the-counter medications. A lot of cough syrups, a lot of Advil, things like that. Sometimes we are able to recover these items before they actually get put onto a marketplace, which is great because when we do find them, they are kept in anything but safe conditions. We have recovered hundreds of over-the-counter medicines that are literally being stored in the trunks of people's cars for days, if not weeks or months, destined just to be sold on an online marketplace. And I know we've picked on Amazon a lot, but we also see this a lot on eBay, Craigslist, as well as Facebook. So one of the reasons why we feel it is so incredibly important for companies to be transparent, or excuse me, for the marketplace to be so transparent about who is selling these products is because if these products are stored in unsafe conditions, that could lead potentially to a great deal of harm for any consumer who is internally digesting these products. And another very large category of products stolen from us is baby formula. And imagine it being stored in a unclimate controlled warehouse and then being sold to an unsuspecting mother constituent of yours, that it was kept in a very unsafe environment, unsafe conditions, not knowing if it had been tainted. So that's just the reality of what we are confronting. We have even recovered things on from Amazon that consumers have brought in to show us they had purchased Advil or something from Amazon and it still had the Walgreens price tag on it. So that's how prevalent this problem is for us. And I would just say that I think it's important for health and safety reasons, not just for organized retail crime reasons.
Let me ask you this, Ms. West. Obviously, fraudulent goods or stolen goods being sold on the internet is the big problem. And then, but with this bill requires online marketplaces to verify information of its sellers. How does is it that verification, or is it the convenience of reporting, requiring the convenience of reporting? Tell me how this bill helps address your issue with stolen medicine being sold online.
Sure. So for us, it helps us to track down where those bad actors are, because like any major corporation, we have an entire arm of security personnel with our team, asset protection team. And for us, it's helpful for us to be able to track down these folks who are repeat offenders. And so basically, if we find if we track down a shoplifter, we know that the shoplifter is not the end person, right? The shoplifter is selling it to a fence who is going to sell it online. That's how these things work. And so our end goal is to get to that fence. And without the transparency piece, which is the disclosure piece, which is what we're really after, then we do not have a good measure for finding the end user, the fence in this game. And so we have had discussions at a very high corporate level with some of these companies, and consistently met with, well, bring us a warrant, we'll disclose the information, and those types of responses. And quite frankly, when you're talking about knowing that there's a warehouse out there with hundreds of your stolen products, the resistance that we've met for being able to find those is just unbelievable.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Ms. West? Okay, seeing none. Who else? Mr. Wilkins, do you want to? Okay, great. Introduce yourself and
Yes,
who you're
sir.
with.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Glenn Wilkins. I'm Director of Public Affairs and Government Relations for Walmart. So I'll be brief and to the point. Walmart does have a marketplace. Walmart does require that everyone provide that personal information up front. We require it. Third-party validation is confirmed. We do a lot of that internally. We also have that contracted out where we verify name, address, bank account, things like that, right? Everything ties together. John Smith, Lawrenceville, Georgia, address, the account information, it all meshes. We're good. You can now sell. So that's one thing that we've done. We find that that's the best thing for our consumer. We find that's the best thing for the person who's actually conducting the business, because then they don't have to compete against some of these other bad actors that are out there that are undercutting the price on something that they have legitimately selling. When I was doing a quick search while I was over here listening to everything going on, if you look on our website, if you go to walmart.com or if you have the app, there is a name for the business. You can click on the name of the business, you get that information. I looked on Amazon, they had pretty good service as well. I'll say that when I looked through there, they had the name and location. I did look on another marketplace and it just said, for example, it was Ryobi, and I looked at it, it just said Marietta, Georgia. That's all it told me, right? So geolocation can tell me, oh, I want to feel like I'm buying it locally. But I didn't, as a consumer, didn't have that information readily available. So those are things we do.
You know, Walmart has a very interesting place in this because you have a marketplace and you also are a retail store where there is a tremendous amount of theft that walks out the doors every single day. So you kind of have both sides of the perspective here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real challenge. As you said, the product does walk out the door. Sometimes it's out the back door before, it even has a chance to go out the front. But that is something that we have a very aggressive asset protection team as well that works.
And so with that, obviously Walmart is a company that has a lot of resources and the ability to, to do these things and do them in the right way where it doesn't make their profit or their business model, it doesn't frustrate the purpose of trying to make money doing these things. From your perspective, as far as requiring other smaller businesses that don't have the resources and the capabilities that Walmart does, do you see that as an issue? And I mean, kind of walk me through your thoughts on the different types. Walmart is in a different class or category of business than, a lot of, these small online marketplaces. So from a resource perspective, to you, does it make sense to require them to do this? And is it expensive? Do you think that it's something that can be achieved for a low price or a low cost?
Again, so I don't have a lot of experience on setting up marketplaces or the history that goes behind it. I look at some of my peers in this room and who they represent. I would imagine they're capable. Heck, they know what I'm thinking I want to buy before I even know I want to buy it, right? I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. We talk about it on the social media and we talk about through the buying, right? So I believe that the resources are there for a lot of the competitors that are here in the room today. As far as the smaller marketplaces, I wouldn't even want to venture on what the cost is, but we're talking about confirming through third party. We use third party to confirm name, address, is the account legitimate, right? I mean, it's these few basic things. It's anything. If I was to set up a brick and mortar store, I'd have to provide to the local jurisdiction where I was going to open up a business.
Explain to me the Walmart marketplace. This is not Walmart.com.
It is Walmart.com.
Well, why is it a marketplace instead of just ordering online from a retail? Like, for example, HomeDepot.com is not a marketplace, is my understanding.
Correct.
Why is Walmart that and Home Depot is not?
At Walmart, we feel that there are a lot of small vendors that may not have the desire to be in our store, and we only have limited space on our shelves. So what we say is we can actually work with the smaller communities. If you look at some of the people, as many vendors as we've listed in the state of Georgia in a letter that I sent out, a lot of those are online. They can operate from their home, yet take advantage of Walmart's name and accessibility
Gotcha.
to customers that are looking out there.
Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Wilkins? Thank you for being here. I know it's taken up your afternoon, but this has been extremely
Mr.
helpful.
Chair, can I ask one question?
Mhm,
for you?
please.
Mr. Wilkins,
Yes, sir.
so does Walmart support every provision in this bill that requires reporting? And do you think it's burdensome to Walmart to do this, or is it something they're already doing?
From my understanding and going through this bill and understanding some of the questions, we support this bill as it is. Okay. Does that mean that we can have some conversations? Let's definitely make sure we get the best thing for the state. But as it sits right now, we support this bill.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hudson, did you want to talk on behalf of Home Depot? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Brian Hudson, members of the committee, and I represent Home Depot, have represented Home Depot in the state of Georgia for roughly 15 years. I just want to touch on obviously we fully support this legislation. I want to touch on a couple of things that were brought up. During one of the conversations, I think Representative Momtahan mentioned something about, and Mr. Chairman, you mentioned this as well, about maybe you find a price in Arizona that the store in Arizona has a sale that maybe in Georgia doesn't. From what I've been told from the Home Depot, of course, our online sales are the same across the board, and our store sales are as well. I mean, we meet as kind of the store associates and decide across the board in all 2,300 plus stores that we have across North America of what the prices are going to be. So you won't necessarily find a sale that's different from, in Arizona or Texas and Georgia. It should be all the same. If it's not, it's something that a store is doing differently, but across the board, it should be the same across the board. I hope that references your question before. And I handed out some information before that shows some of our proprietary brands on these marketplace websites. And I think the important thing to point out here is these products are made for Home Depot. And Mr. Chairman, to your point, before about are the manufacturers selling these, the answer is no. So these are, in the reference you referenced before about the person in China, what I was told is no, the manufacturers are not selling this. We don't know who that is, obviously, but these proprietary brands are sold on HomeDepot.com and in our stores. And that is the only place you should be able to find them. There are a few exceptions. So I think this was mentioned before, Representative Mompahan might have mentioned this, or Thomas might have mentioned this, where let's say a store is hit by a hurricane and the whole store, maybe not all the products are completely damaged, but from an insurance perspective, all of them are technically quote unquote damaged. So sometimes we sell those products and they could be replicated and sold on the marketplace. So that is one example, but there are other examples where these products are stolen and then sold on these marketplaces. And as we referenced before, Sally West, our good friends from Walgreens mentioned this before. All these retailers have inside kind of internal investigation units called AP Asset Protection. And our folks, whether it's going to a pawn shop and tracking down a product that's stolen from our stores to the marketplace, we want to make sure that we know where the pawn shops are. We can go to wherever pawn shop and look in there and see what's been stolen. On these marketplaces, some of them are not disclosing exactly who is selling it, where they're located, et cetera. So that not only helps our internal team track that down, but it also helps us put these investigations together for the DAs and the other law enforcement to go after these folks. So to Sally's point, I want to just echo what she was saying about transparency. It's extremely important for us to track that and make sure that when we find an organized ring that's stealing from us, that we can go after them and know exactly where they're located. To Glenn's point with Walmart, we did a search on Ryobi Tools, which is another Home Depot proprietary brand. We did find them on Walmart.com on their marketplace, but as Glenn mentioned, we clicked on the company. It said who they are, contact information, everything else. And I don't want to speak for Walmart or Glenn, but they're verified. So we know that they're a legitimate product, possibly purchased from an insurance claim or something like that. So again, this is about transparency. This is about going after the organized criminals and also providing consumers with protection as well.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hudson? Okay, thank you.
Can I comment on
Please.
one other client actually? 'Cause I
And you
think
got a
this-
question now, so, but,
Okay. I'll take the question from Representative McLaurin.
Okay,
Before
thanks.
I comment.
Thanks, Mr. Hudson.
course.
We had a discussion last term
We
about
did.
corporate policy and how that relates to organized retail crime. I get the sense just from having fleshed out the issue over the last couple of years that there are ways, obviously, in which organized retail crime would continue, even if your client and a number of other corporations had more strict return policies, for example. But I guess what I would wonder is from I know today we spent time talking about Part C, but you mentioned the organized retail crime problem in general. My question would be, how much of the organized retail crime problem that you face would be eliminated if your client and other corporations had stricter return policies in terms of requiring receipts, that sort of thing, less average customer goodwill available? Unfortunately, if you were to take that step, how much of a problem would be remaining?
That's a good question. I don't know the percentage of whether or not it would go down. I do know that, and we talked about this last year, Home Depot is proud of the fact that we have a more consumer-friendly return policy. That is what retailers should be about, is consumer-friendly and making sure that our customers can come into our stores, return things even if they lose a receipt. It happens to everybody. And they'll come back and they'll get a gift card, or if they do have a receipt, they're going to get a full refund on whatever card they use. So we're proud of our return policy, and we think it's beneficial to the consumer. As to whether or not, what percentage we think is going to cut down, I cannot speak on whether or not we're going to change our return policy. I don't see that happening, but I don't speak for the company in that regard. That is way above my head. But I think right now we're proud of the return policy that we have in place.
Okay, and to Chair, I apologize if we don't want to go afield of Part 3 today. I just figured since Mr. Hudson was here, and I know we're talking about these issues in general. I mean, that is going to be where I stage my objection to the bill. It was my objection last term that 3 to 20 felony as opposed to changing corporate policy. But I'm glad that we got an opportunity to see more of the ORC problem outside of just through the return pathway, because I feel better informed about understanding how online distribution can play a role in retail crime as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to comment Mr. Chairman, if it's okay. Just kind of a different perspective. We also represent Hewlett Packard, HP. So HP has a major presence in Georgia, obviously headquartered in California. HP fully supports this bill. I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that outside of retailers, there are major manufacturers in this country that support this legislation, not only here, but federally and across the country. And from their perspective, it's counterfeit. HP obviously is the leader in PCs and laptops, as well as printers. And there are a countless number of counterfeit products that end up on these marketplaces. So I just want to, for the record, throw that down as well.
Mr. Chair, could I ask a question?
please.
Mr. Hudson, I may have missed it. We may have talked about it. Has Home Depot or maybe even Walmart, have we put a dollar figure on the issue that we're trying to figure out right here, this organized type crime?
Mr. Chairman, I believe from a national perspective, I think Mr. Busey can reference that.
Okay, well, I can get with him offline about that, but I wanted to know if specifically
it's substantial.
Home Depot have you guys done an internal audit to figure out how much this is impacting you from a dollar figure standpoint?
We certainly have. Unfortunately, I can't disclose that. But there are pieces, and this has been brought up. I mean, there are certainly internal theft that we haven't, we investigate and we go after clearly from an employee standpoint. But then obviously there's an external side of that as well. And I think I can only speak for Home Depot. We have come up with that, but I can't, unfortunately.
Well, I got you one more, if I may. With your loss prevention team, did I understand it correctly that if this measure comes to bear and it's signed in law and you can identify these folks, they're actively pursuing right now, investigating these things, and then
That's
what
correct.
happens? They turn it over to law enforcement after they identify them, or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what we see now with our asset protection departments is they will investigate various crimes that happen in our stores. And a lot of times our internal folks, and I can only speak from what I've learned from Home Depot, will literally put together the case for law enforcement. Sometimes what I've been told from our asset protection folks is sometimes we deliver that case. Literally all you have to do is file this and you will catch these people. And I think that's going to continue, whether it's through our marketplace, which currently is happening right now, or through just brick and mortar, or through pawn shops and other flea markets and things like that. So our guys, like I said, they do the investigation, they pull up the film, they pull up all the information that they need to put together a case, and they hand deliver it to the law enforcement officials.
And are they already identifying these high volume sellers that are attached to this idea of the organized crime?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer to that question as whether or not we are identifying high volume sellers. I do know that we are working with law enforcement to track down the organized criminals that end up selling some of these products online as well currently. So we're kind of doing both. We just feel like this takes the next step as far as transparency, not only for the consumer, to Representative McLaurin's point before, but also for our internal folks, and I think the rest of the retail world's internal folks, to help bring those cases to the law enforcement officials.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for testimony.
Chairman Efstration has a.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Hudson, and those who have testified about this. And I'm a little late to review this bill, but just had a chance to read it sitting here, and just had a few questions that maybe you could help me. I certainly feel like I appreciate the policy need behind it. My questions are more about how it's drafted and how this will work. So first of all, Section 2 it looks like it's dealing with dealers and stored value cards, and there's quite a few restrictions that will be placed on them, specifically how they're to maintain records, how long those records are to be kept. And I feel like I know of some dealers like these on the internet currently, where if you have say a gift card, you want to sell it to them, or you want to buy a gift card, you can go through and do that. I guess my question initially are these restrictions consistent with what these websites or these reputable online marketplaces, I guess I'd call them, are already doing, or is it going to be a different treatment for Georgia residents who are buying or selling these cards on these sites?
I think I know what you're asking. Thomas may be better suited, Mr. Chairman, to answer that, if that's okay.
Sure. And same question for Section 3 about these online marketplaces and the high volume sellers. We've got a bunch of new restrictions which they'll have to follow, and just whether that's consistent with what we're seeing from the reputable online marketplaces that we already have right now, or is there going to be different treatment for Georgians?
That's a very good question. Thomas, do you want to? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair of Administration. To your first question, in Section 2, this is what we would require of someone in the state of Georgia that was a pawn shop that's doing the same behavior. This would just go to merchants that are doing the same thing as the pawn shop and purchasing these gift cards. Does that answer your question?
So I'll be real specific. I know of a website, I think it's called Reeves, where you can buy gift cards online. You can buy.
They would be authorized. So no, they would not, this would not affect them.
Well, there's nothing here that restricts it only to pawn shops.
No, sir. We're creating the new definition of a third-party card dealer and talking in the definitions of who is authorized in the gift card transaction. If they're selling gift cards from multiple merchants, they would either be a corporate issuer agent or a corporate authorized reseller. So there would be no recording information. If you're not authorized in the gift card chain to purchase gift cards from individuals, then you would be subject to these requirements. The way to conceptually think of it, and the way we've explained it in the past, is if you are a storefront that is, we buy gold, or where you have a sign that says we buy gift cards, but you may not be authorized by any one of those companies to do that, you would be required to record this from the individual from which you're purchasing it.
Okay. Where does it say that here? I see the definition of third-party card dealer.
Correct. When a third party makes, it's a merchant, the business might send gift cards. That is on the contingent of the card itself and the definition of a third party card. A third party card is a store value card as we define it, but a third party card is that stored value card when it is in a transaction with someone who is not authorized in the previous definitions.
Okay. Okay.
And to your second question, sir, about the online marketplaces and what is required there. Currently in Georgia law or in any other law, we don't require this information. This is a new, a nascent policy position and thought in that the issue of consumer protection and organized retail crime is compelling enough to put this in Georgia law. And it's a relatively new concept nationally and a new regulatory scheme nationally.
Okay. So potentially there could be reputable marketplaces online right now where this information is not being collected, and this would be a new requirement, additional requirement that would distinguish Georgia from other states.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I think I'm gonna have to follow up with you about the third party card, but maybe I'll eventually get to where you already are and what you're thinking on that.
It's very similar to what we had last year and what we passed out of Judiciary non-civil last year. We altered some of the definitions to hopefully make it more clear, more specific to who we're after. And I'm happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, please.
So my next question is about smaller marketplaces as to section 3.
Yes.
So let's say that somebody decided that they wanted to create their own marketplace online for, for a certain type of good, and the bill would place certain obligations on them based upon who is a high volume seller. Certain restrictions must be met. But my question is, how would that marketplace know who is a high volume seller?
I believe that all of these marketplaces, even a small marketplace, if you're going to open up an online marketplace, the technological knowledge and the infrastructure that you would need to deploy that you would know who is doing whether they are who they say they are or not. You would know account X is doing X amount of sales. And I believe that you could easily write an algorithm to trigger a notification when that third party had hit that. Because I don't think taking up and creating and deploying a third party or an online marketplace is any sort of mean feat that anyone's just going to casually undertake.
Well, is it the intention that if there's more than 200 transactions within 12 months of 24 months exceeding $5,000 in revenue, that be on that online marketplace?
I'm not sure I follow your question.
Yeah, sure. So I guess my question is, are you saying that there's an expectation that the marketplace operator becomes aware of that because that high frequency selling is occurring on that same marketplace?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think, as I read it, I don't think that's required. But if you're agreeable to that, that might address that issue.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And same question for the size of the seller. So, and you all are the experts on this, but is that I'm thinking if there was somebody who was selling maybe some, I don't know, like some clothing item or something, baby clothes or shoes or something like that, that the number of sales could exceed 200 and the value could exceed $5,000, but it may not be, they may not be the type of person that you're trying to capture here. Because certainly once captured, once you hit that threshold, there are a lot of requirements that would come into play. So, so any comments that you have about that, about maybe smaller sellers that you're not really trying to capture, and how you came to the quantity and dollar threshold that you have here?
Yes, sir. The quantity and dollar threshold was agreed upon by a coalition of industries, not only retail industry, but the consumer health products industry, the Toy Association, and other folks, that is where we should start verifying. As far as the requirements, it's, in our opinion, general business information. The requirement is that it is available to the marketplace and the marketplace verify it. So for the person, it's the providing of the information. In many cases, the online marketplace would already have. The requirement is the verification requirement that the online marketplace should know and should be required to know who exactly is doing business on their marketplace. As to the type of products in the bill, that is the threshold for transactions. But I think that, and I can't stress enough because sometimes it gets maybe glossed over, if that's of new and unused products. If you're selling used products of any kind, that is not included in that. So it is new and unused products. And as well, and I don't know, sir, if you were in here when we did this, we made an alteration to the definition of consumer product that what would count towards that threshold. And an individual, to answer what I've been calling the Etsy issue, if an individual is manufacturing a product that is not otherwise protected in commerce, Representative Sainz had a great example of a constituent that's manufacturing face masks to raise funds, that person wouldn't be covered in the definition.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anything else for, okay, great. Mr. Watson, we had a 1 second halftime and we're in the second half now. Hopefully the second half is going to go by faster, but Mr. Watson, do you want to come up here and then tell me what you want to do? I think there's somebody online.
Mr. Chairman, there are two folks online, one from TechNet and one from Internet Association that have a much higher degree of specificity and detail associated with this policy than I. As the representative in John Watson representing Amazon in Georgia, I did want to state, Mr. Chairman, we are 21,000 Georgians strong and growing. This is a critical issue for our company and the industry writ large. Obviously, theft, fraudsters, and criminality have no place in this process. However, as an advocate for what our policies are, Mr. Chairman, I know you're going to ask ultimately, what exactly do you do in verification? And I've got to get that back to you from the corporation. What I know is the process revealed just last year 2.5 million instances of fraud and fraudsters, and we have instituted a policy of visual verification of those folks that are onboarding as our sellers. And so with that, in terms of my testimony and further actions or further statements, Mr. Chairman, I need to leave it to the folks on the phone from the association level.
Great. Can we, is it possible to get both of them where they can both talk at the same time? Or so we can go back and forth? Okay, so who are we looking for here?
Servando and James.
James Hines and Servando. Pronounce your last name for us, sir.
Esparza.
Say that again.
Esparza.
Esparza. If you're a little quiet, I don't know if you can move closer to your microphone, or I might turn your volume up. But okay, what I want to do. We obviously have been through a very, long hearing here, but it was unfortunately, it was necessary and it was time well spent, because I think that now we all can visualize what the legislation is trying to achieve here better. And I want you to address the things that you want to address, but I will tell you that some of the areas that I think that I have the most questions and concern about, based on the information that we heard from the retailers, is number one, what's the cost associated with this idea of verification? It's been presented to us that the marketplaces already have this information, or at least most of it, but that in order to have it verified, that's what the bill would require, is taking this information and having it verified, and then taking parts of that information and making it publicly available. So I want to know what your thoughts are on, if you agree with what they said about marketplaces already having this information. And then I want you to address why or why not it's feasible to ask marketplaces to verify this. And I also want you to discuss the risk and liability of the passing of this information. What risks is this place with you? And I want us to all be very, very specific on the risks and liabilities that this places on you that would be new, that you currently already, if a marketplace has a bank account information, then there's already an inherent risk of that being hacked or stolen. So what additional risks and additional liabilities does this bring? And so those are kind of some of the areas I'm most concerned about, but I would like for you to respond in general. And I think that we're in a better position to receive your perspectives than we were the last time we heard this, because I think we have a much better idea of what we're doing here. So I don't care which one of you goes first. It doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I can jump in, and James, you can cover anything that I might have missed. But I think what I'd like to tackle before getting into the costs associated that you mentioned is, and this, you brought this up at the last hearing, is the wide net. Is essentially who is this catching? And I want to go back to one of the original examples that was shared when the bill was laid out about, and I think several of the members expressed an example, but one of the examples that I use is someone that buys winter clothes during the summer and then sells them, right? And so it is not used, but it is legally purchased goods. One of the pieces there is a lot of what is going to be caught in the definition, even with the adjustment made in the definition of consumer product, is still going to catch a lot of folks. And that's important to understand, because the cost associated with verification, the net is still pretty wide, and it will catch a lot. One of the pieces on the cost associated with verification is all the information that has to be verified. One of the included in the definition of consumer product is verifying whether the seller engages in the manufacturing, importing, or reselling, or whether they're selling on another site. I don't know how an online marketplace will identify that, and or if any of that is changed when in the piece where we're talking about the process in which a online marketplace collects the information from the seller, and then verified. If a seller modifies or changes, loses that phone number or whatever, the fear that I want to share and the risk to one of your questions is, is the online marketplace liable for any of the changes that are no longer, verified, after verified, any changes that were made after that was verified? So, a couple of those points there that I wanted just to tackle right off the bat.
Well, all right. So let me make sure that I understand this right. You're saying that after the marketplace verifies the information, then the seller's information could change, and if they don't give that changed information to the marketplace, then does it potentially expose the marketplace to some kind of liability or some kind of additional liability? Is that, am I hitting it right?
I think that's an important question to ask, because if the scenario, the example was shared earlier about you call the number that's listed with the person selling, and you get the tone that the phone number is no longer activated. If that was already verified, there was no notice to the online marketplace. I think it's a valid question to understand how that would affect us.
That's interesting. And I think, well, nobody left in the room to answer this question. I think one of the things that I'm not sure that I remember, but is the duty to provide information ongoing? And then if it is, does it have to be verified continuously? And I mean, that Does anybody recall from the bill and the presentation, McLaurin?
So I recall, and I can probably pull it up pretty quick here. There's an annual re-up at the very least. And I know that that's the minimum. What I don't know, and I'd have to really stare at for a minute, because despite the speed at which we moved through, at least for this point, I still did not spend a whole lot of time focusing on it. Okay, so lines 146 and on. Online marketplace shall on at least an annual basis send the notification each high volume third-party seller and require to inform. So, if the standing policy of an online marketplace is continuous updating, and that's at the election of the online marketplace, then it appears to me that there could be created a continuing obligation. That's the thing I hadn't spent a whole lot of time thinking about, but it appears possible.
Which would then create an obligation of continuing verification, which has a cost associated with it. We still haven't heard anything that helps us understand the significance of that cost. But regardless, that would also then create a continuing burden to verify it. So if I'm reading that right.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to add one more.
And I mean, let me, Chairman Burchett, did you have anything you wanted to?
No, I agree with what you just said there, but who are these guys with?
Yeah, I forgot to, I apologize. Let's back up. Tell us who you're with.
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Servando Esparza. I'm TechNet's Executive Director for the Southeast. TechNet is a national bipartisan network of tech CEOs and senior executives that promote the growth of the innovation economy by advocating for a targeted policy agenda at the federal and 50 state level.
And I am James Hines, Director of the Southern Region for the Internet Association. The Internet Association represents leading internet companies on matters of public policy.
That's perfect. Because that leads into my question.
Are you the same two gentlemen that were with us previously in this hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
David, our VP, was on the last meeting.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Chairman Burchett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The question I have, and this is a general question, now that I know who you guys are representing, how many online marketplaces does this piece of legislation affect, or do we know that?
It affects all online marketplaces. There are dozens and dozens. In fact, I think I've researched almost up to 100 online marketplaces that citizens in Georgia can access.
Okay, thank you. That's it. Sorry.
Let me ask this is a pointed question. In the bill, the online marketplace would be required. Let's see. It looks like they're required to verify the full name, the physical address, contact information, phone number, and working email address. I believe that's the information that would be required, that the marketplace would be required to verify. Do you agree? I believe that we've been presented with testimony that states that marketplaces have this information already. Is that a statement that you agree with, or do you have a different perspective on whether or not, regardless of this bill, despite this bill, do online marketplaces have the bank information, the full name, the physical address, the phone number, and the email address?
If I may proceed. Some marketplaces have this information, and I think it's already been mentioned today that there are some sites that you can go to and you can see this information. I do not believe that all online marketplaces have all of the information listed. The information that is the most troublesome is the bank account information. The risk associated with capturing and verifying this information are privacy and cybersecurity risks. Once it's known that this information is being captured and possibly displayed on websites, we feel that these online marketplaces could essentially become targets for cybercrime. So there is significant verification risk with respect to the bank accounts on privacy and cybercrime.
But I believe that, see, all right, and I may be getting confused again, but I thought the testimony from the last time is that the marketplace has the bank account, or is that the seller? Does the marketplace always have the bank account information that relates to the transaction?
Some third-party sellers use a third-party payment processor like a PayPal, so that information would be with that processor, not with the online marketplace. So the online marketplace would have to obtain that information from the third-party payment processor.
Do you have I'm looking for, varying degrees here. Do we have any data on what percentage of online marketplaces use third-party pay vendors versus which ones process the payments directly? I mean, do we have that data available?
We do not have that information ready today. I do know that it is a significant number of sellers who do use third-party payment processing.
So just so that everybody's clear, if they use third-party payment processors, then they would not be in possession of the banking information. And therefore, in order to verify it, they would have to obtain it from the third party. And then they would have to then go through whatever the verification process is and then receive an answer from the verification process that either validates or invalidates the banking information. Is that right?
Yes, since the verification process for collecting bank account information is not clear in the bill, we would have to figure out what the steps are and look into exactly what we would need to tell the different compliance teams for the marketplaces.
What is the problem in your mind? So let's move away from the banking information, but let's talk about the ability to verify the identity of the seller and that they are a real business and their full name and their address and their email and phone number. What's the hesitancy or the pushback from your perspective on why it's unreasonable to require marketplaces to have that information? Why is that not a reasonable ask?
So once again, I think with respect to some marketplaces, that information you may be able to find. I think with some of the smaller online marketplaces who may not have captured all of the information that is listed in the bill, they will have to make a business determination. Is it worth the risk to collect that, to maintain it, to verify it each year, so that increases.
What's the risk in non-banking information?
That's just more administrative work for maybe smaller online marketplaces who may not have all of that information. I would say generally, I would think that the online marketplaces know who is using their website as to all the specific information that they capture. I cannot speak to that. And I think it's that it will vary by marketplace.
We've lost the screen here. All right, you're back now. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, we lost you about 10 seconds ago, so pick up where you were.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was just saying, with respect to the smaller online marketplaces, it just increases their cost as far as records that they have to obtain, maintain if they are not doing that already. And so that is part of the risk that they will assess as to whether or not they want to provide this platform to certain sellers.
And I guess the thing, and I'm not asking you to know the answer to this, but the thing from my perspective is they may not want to, and it might be administratively, an additional task to do that. But in the spirit of kind of balancing consumer protection and knowing that there are, that people want to feel secure, and they want to know if they buy something, especially from a smaller marketplace that doesn't have the protections or the accessibility of things that the bigger ones do. That, you know, I think that there's value in people knowing that information. And so, you know, I mean, they may not want to, but is it, you know, why would it be, or would it be a deal breaker to require them to be able to provide that information?
Yeah, I think, we share your goal of, wanting to, protect consumers and to curtail, organized retail crime. I think, there is a longer discussion that needs to be had about, what is really effective, what is impactful in achieving those goals. And, in our review of this, legislation, we just have concerns of what ultimately the effect is on the small businesses of Georgia. Those who are, entrepreneurial, your micro businesses, your small businesses that are using these online platforms, as they try to figure out, and make sure that they are complying with this law.
Mr. Chairman, if I can add,
Please.
on the burdensome piece, I'll go over the 2 points that I mentioned earlier about, whether the seller engages in manufacturing, importing, reselling is difficult for an online marketplace to verify. Additionally, if you're selling it on one site versus the other site is also difficult to understand. And then back to my a point about the scope, even for smaller online marketplaces, even though there's a threshold and the consumer products is attempting to be narrowed in the committee sub, it's still the default is going to be to require this information because in order for a marketplace to understand when the trigger hits for every single seller of these specific types of sales, and then 2, for things that are really difficult to verify, it makes it very difficult and confusing to be absolutely certain.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to back up a little bit here, but I think you said when we first started, you referenced what we had discussed the last time on and in fact, I think I'm the one that coined the term, but the wide net that this legislation throws out and what that means for everything that it captures in the ocean. And with the intention, obviously our universe is already limited to new or unused goods. And then the definition has now been further limited to rule out homemade type stuff. And I think one of the biggest concerns that I had, which I expressed at the last hearing, was the wide net. And how can we continue? What are some things that we are still catching? I understand your point. You buy winter clothes in the summer when they're cheap, and then you sell them and you make a little bit of money off of them. What are the things that we're catching in the net that catching these things in the net and requiring these things doesn't help us with kind of solving the problem that we're trying to solve? And can the definition be further limited so that the size of the net gets smaller and the net really is more geared to bringing back the pieces that are the players that are wrongdoing?
Yeah, I can tackle a little bit about. So I think the example that I used about the winter summer clothing. I think anytime that someone sells anything that they purchase and no longer want to use, or they purchase the wrong thing and they sell it, the threshold in the bill is 200 sales, which is 4 sales a week. So you can imagine someone that just buys things and sell them, they'll be roped into this. And so I think one of and I mentioned it a second ago, I think the point in that, yes, this is attempting to narrow the consumer products that would be caught in the net, right? Or the sellers that because of what they sell would be caught in the net. However, the requirements about the collecting that information, ensuring that it's correct. What I'm saying, and going back to the point, is because the threshold is so low on the number of sales, a marketplace would have to understand verify the types of sales and collect that information, to verify the sales, classify them in whatever category that would, and to ensure that they're not running afoul of the threshold here, and then make sure that that information is published. What I'm saying is the threshold is so low that it's going to require online marketplaces to post this information or collect information from the start, even if if the seller may not ever fall into this threshold, but for the potential fear of that trigger applying to that person, the online marketplace is probably going to collect that and the process start there. So I'm saying the effect of it is pretty large and broad.
And I share the concern, up to this point, that the thresholds, the 205,000 are probably too low. And I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm not asking you to answer right now, but as we continue to look at this legislation and looking at its viability, I would be curious to know, and again, not right now, but I would be curious to know what folks that come from your perspective think that a more fair threshold in both terms of revenue and sales transactions would be. And I have no idea what the magic number is there, but that is information that I would love to be educated on or to get your perspective on. Who does anybody else? Does anybody else have any questions? I know we went a long time on the other side of this, but now is the time. I think our brains are a little mush at this point. But okay, Chairman Burchett.
Thank you, Chairman. With the structure we have here, do you find are you in total opposition to everything in this bill, or do you think there's a place we can come to that you would possibly be either in a neutral or support position?
Sir, TechNet is just opposed to Section 3 in the bill. This is a new issue. I know that there was reference earlier that there's an Oklahoma bill that was just in a committee hearing this week. So find the same fight over there, trying to understand and provide the feedback that the scope is very large. So at this point, we're still against based on what we've seen in the committee sub.
So,
and same Internet Association is opposed to Part 3.
So do you recognize that the public policy that we're trying to address here in that we have organized theft that is now has an outlet that we cannot regulate, and so we want to make it easy as possible to catch these folks while at the same time allowing e-commerce to continue to grow. So do you think there's would you be amenable to helping us draft language that addresses this, but at the same time, that addresses this issue? So in other words, are you amenable to being a part of trying to help us with this problem?
Yes, sir. On behalf of TechNet, absolutely. I do want to take a step back and also agree that yes, like TechNet wants to do its part to tackle the issue. I think one of the issues is in this manner and in this language, what it's seeking to do is put a lot of overly burdensome requirements on online marketplaces with the hopes that at the end of collecting and verifying this information, that somehow someone will connect the dots and say, okay, here it is. Here's that type of criminal activity that's being searched. And we just don't think that's effectively this way going to get us there. But absolutely, we'll work with everybody to achieve the goal of going after this type of crime.
And I think that what Chairman Burchett is alluding to, and you very well may have the position that you're not interested, or that your industry or whoever it is isn't interested in helping us get to if there's a middle ground on here that maybe nobody loves, but everybody can live with. You know, obviously legislation, you know, you can either, oftentimes you can be involved and help and be productive and offer constructive advice and help us get there. Or if that's not the approach, then a lot of times then the worst case scenario that you envision is what ends up happening. And I think that this body and this committee, although it's not always possible, but we certainly look for collaborative opportunities. And, you know, it's just like a lot of things in life. Sometimes when you get to the place and nobody's happy, that means that you've done your job right. And that's, I think, sometimes where we are in this committee. We understand that what these types of legislations, it sends ripple effects down that have an impact on people and businesses. And we understand that. And what we hope for, you know, not asking you to work against yourself, but what we would love is for y'all to work with us in a constructive way in how we look at this and over the next coming weeks. So.
Mr. Chairman, certainly willing to work with you to achieve these goals. I think one thing that has not had much airtime in these two hearings is the current extent to which many of our companies are involved and have deployed technology to combat illegal goods, counterfeit goods, to take down certain users, to take down sellers. There has a lot that has been invested, millions of dollars, in this effort to tackle some of these problems. And so we certainly also welcome the opportunity maybe to submit some more information about what we're currently doing, what has resulted in some success as far as partnering with law enforcement. I think if we can highlight what we're currently doing, that adds another perspective to this issue.
And I think that, you know, and I think we're getting close to wrapping things up, but I just want to say that I'm insisting, I don't care who gives it to me, but I'm insisting that we be provided some kind of spread that allows us to understand what the cost that is associated with verification. I understand you got the liability piece, which is in one category, and getting information from I understand that. But let's assume you have this information, what the cost is associated with getting it verified. And I expect that for probably, you know, for bigger companies, it's probably a different cost than for little companies or smaller companies. And so I want this committee to have, I think that's some of the most pertinent information that we have got to have, is an idea of what the cost associated with this is, because part of our analysis has to revolve around whether or not it's reasonable to ask, especially small businesses, to do this. And if this is a significant expense for a small business that interrupts their business model, then that's something that we would strongly consider. But I think that until we have that information, it's impossible for us to make a judgment on that. Does anybody else have anything? Anyone on the committee have anything that they want to discuss? Sains, you look like you were about to hit your button. I want to thank both of you for bearing with us this afternoon. Again, this is a big issue. It has a big impact. And this is one of the things where we have to take an excruciating amount of time so that we can understand it and make informed decisions on how we're approaching this. Thank you both. Representative Momtahan, do you have, since it's your bill, I'll give you the last word. What's your number?
Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Look, it's a very complicated, complex issue, and I think we have heard a lot about the bill today, about the inner workings, and I'm hoping that we can come back. Seems like the idea is to hold it today, come back with some more amenable sections of the bill, and hopefully continue to work on this bill in the next week.
Great. And I just want to say to the committee members, thank you. I asked a lot of you to hang in here this afternoon and sit here for over 4 hours. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I know we're all busy right now, and I cannot say how much I appreciate the attentiveness of this. And hopefully we're in a good position to figure out what to do next. Thank you, everybody. And I'm going to adjourn this committee. Thank you, everyone, for your participation.